Hello and welcome to the Off-Meta Umineko Read-Along podcast, the bi-weekly podcast where I guide my friends and first-time readers through my favorite story of all time, the highly acclaimed murder mystery visual novel Umineko When They Cry. We'll be discussing its narrative and themes, and our community of theater-going witches will watch on vicariously as we try and solve its various mysteries. Hope you all join us in this exciting journey as we delve into the witch's cat box. There, I changed. There, you happy? It's much less of a tongue twister now.
Well, yeah, but now it's a spoiler to the end of the reading.
Yeah. That's right.
There's no winning with me, Kyle. Just the sooner you accept that and live your life as you would, the happier you're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I do also appreciate that you keep changing like the time frame at which we release these podcasts, because who knows at this point.
It's a moving window, yeah. We seem to have settled on a once every 2 week schedule, though. That seems to be pretty doable. So
go team.
We'll take it.
Well, I'm Kyle J, and joining me on a one-way trip for Rokkenjiima, we have our readers, James Capelli, Ben, and Becca. Welcome, y'all. So, how was your read this week?
It's good.
I learned something.
Yeah.
I learned at least one thing. That's what I know.
I was surprised by very little of this reading based on how the rest of 7 led up to this point.
Mm-mm.
But, it's nice to get confirmation. It's nice to see some character arcs resolve and probably never see some of them again, which is a shame. But, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the row, and I am looking forward to talking about it.
I'm curious to know which ones that you think won't be resolved any further and which ones you think will, because I don't know if I have a clear idea.
Hey, you just said it.
Oh, sure. He's done. He's done. He's gone.
We're never going to see him, and we're never going to see
Leon, that version of Leon.
No, well, I'm not sure. Maybe not. Probably not. But the Beato with the green hair. What was the name they were giving her?
Clair.
Clair. Yeah, but I don't think we're going to see a Clair again.
Clair the Bernardus.
No, I don't think that we need to necessarily.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't need to.
I like both of their arcs are done, so yeah, I feel that. I thought you were talking more about the Genji, Nanjo, Kumasawa arcs.
Oh no, there's still plenty more to explore there.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of their stuff actually wrapped up quite nicely. Not wrapped up, but like
we still have to get to like why they were okay with murder.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to what exactly happened, but we understand a lot more behind the dynamics behind them, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So I also think that I don't think it's deeper for Genji, Kumasawa, and Nanjo other than Yasu is now the Ushiromiya family head. Like,
Yep.
I genuinely think that's it. Also, I do still think that maybe there's an element of atonement for their own participation in what happened to them, but I do hope that we get more of that.
I hope that there's a more depth to, yeah, we were complicit with murder because our boss told us to.
I don't know about the murder part. I'm wondering, it leads up to what exactly happened. It does confirm why those specific 3 people, like, families were, like, sent money by Yasu, like, that we learned about, in episode 4 with Angie?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot.
I think that was kind of what I was going for, is like, yes, we don't know exactly still what happened in the cat box itself, but I think we figured out a lot now about the mysteries behind them. I no longer can think that Kumasawa done it in the same sense that I could have before, because we now know the mastermind. We don't know, we know what their motivations are now for a lot of this, up until what happened on 1986, October, whatever, that started this whole thing, and what exactly led them to the collapse of everything, such that Eva is the only one to escape.
Mm-hmm.
I do hope that we get more, maybe context is the right word for whatever additional motive Yasu has, because there is that line in this reading where I can't remember exactly the phrasing of it, but Yasu says, like, this is the best I can explain my heart, and there's nothing else really there. And there's a part of that line where it's like, you can figure it out from here. I've given you everything. There is more here to figure it out, but I'm not going to spell it out for you, essentially, was what I took from that. And I'm still kind of at a loss for what that might be, even though I've been re-listening to all of our podcast episodes about episodes 3 and 4. And re-listening to that has made me come up with a lot of other theories about other things that still remain unexplained that I feel very, very confident in now. I don't know if this episode will be the right time to bring them up, but like the Beato and Battler scene in the rain, which Ben called at the time as being like the most important scene in Umineko, I still think is the most important scene in Umineko. And I also think there's an element of mariage sorciere that plays into all of this, but I don't know. I still feel like we're missing a few pieces of the puzzle, but I don't know how much more we'll get.
Yeah, that is the nature of the beast, right? Like, I mean, is there more information to be gleaned from the rest of the series? Yes, there is, but I think you'll be surprised at how much of the things that you're curious about may be as far as you're going to get to know, at least from the VN explicitly. Of course, there's more we could find out from the manga. The manga has quite a bit, well, not quite a bit. I would say at least a few definitive additional bits of information and that's going to be an ongoing conversation about, like, well, do we want to talk about that? Do we want to kind of read the VN, give our take on the VN, and then have the manga be its own supplemental stuff that we insert afterwards, or should we insert manga stuff, now? Because as in this reading, we get answers to the mysteries somewhat. Even as someone who knows the answers from the manga, I'm looking at some of these, I'm going like, yeah, I guess.
An illusion of chains. It's
Yeah.
so oblique, and the images they show as well are so like adjacent to what happened that there's still so much. I don't actually think I know how many of these murders were committed, except for some of the stuff in episode 4.
Yeah. Because half the answers are allusions to illusions, the gold truth, illusions, the illusion. It's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. That's funny that you say that because, like, before going into this, I messaged Kyle and was like, hey, before I get into, you said all the answers for some of these mysteries are coming in this reading. So I'm going to give my thought on how I thought each Twilight happened. And I got like halfway into episode 3 where I was just like, really, none of the murders matter from this point forward. Like, each episode has a couple mysteries that are important. So I'm not going to bother. Like, episode 4.
Yeah, there's like almost no mysteries in episode 4.
None of it happens like on screen to like what, because Battler's not around for any of it. So it's just like, all right, hearsay. So someone's lying. That's a mystery. And the end of episode 4 with the rain is, okay, that's another mystery. But that's like kind of it. And so I was all pumped. I was all excited to be like, all right, we're gonna get some deets.
Yeah.
And then it happens, and I'm like, oh, all right, this is what Kyle meant when he said we're not gonna get much answers. So I just take it as like my rationale is close enough to the truth that I'm content.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting perspective. As someone, you laid out some pretty solid theories. Do you feel like the way that it did it confirmed things to you personally, Capelli? Do you think that you were correct based on what you had and what was said here?
I think a couple. I think there's a couple that I'm like, I think I probably actually need to go back and reevaluate a couple of them. But I think at least episodes 1 and 2, I think I have those pretty much solved, I suspect.
Yeah, so I mean, then I think it's pretty effective then. I mean, like, because that's kind of what the story wants. Like, if you think you've got an actual answer, this is a way to check your answer to the degree where you can say, like, I think I got it, or I think I need to check again.
I'm happy that I'm content with the way that the end was presented. It very easily could be like, what do you mean they don't spell it out? This is a mystery book. Where's the grand reveal? Which I would not be upset if we got that, and we still may get some, or the manga may give it to us, or external interviews may give it to us. Like, I would not be upset about any of that because I understand that this story he's telling is like the characters and the heart is what is the most important part. And if you can understand the message he's saying, that's
it's a bold choice.
I mean, that's what art is, right? Is just understanding the purpose and the intent of its creator. And I think he's done a good job with that.
Not even understanding the intent of the creator, just understanding your own interpretation and having the textual evidence that supports what you think. That's what
I think it goes hand in hand, right? To understand their intent and then kind of how you reflect on it and interpret that is all important.
That's the death of the author aspect, right? Like, it's one thing to understand theirs and then also to have your own, which it's nice that Ryukishi is trying to honor that.
Big time.
Yeah. It's really quite interesting. I've not seen a story. Well, I mean, I think a lot of other mediums do this, but mysteries just don't do this. And for good reason, because some people do not like this. And I think, Ben, you might be one of the people who were craving some of the more direct answers. And that's why the manga exists, right? It exists I think they did a good job of allowing, if you want that vagary, the VN will leave you with the room to interpret things. And then if you need those hard answers, the manga has them. So, and I think after we finish this episode, we'll talk more about how we want to.
I do want to read it. I would much rather read it than watch the anime because I have zero desire to watch something that's unfinished.
Well, the anime's not going to give you shit. The anime doesn't cover through episode 4.
No, I know. That's what I
mean.
Is that I don't want to watch something that's unfinished. One, I don't like to
Gotcha.
start things that I feel are unfinished. I'll watch a season because to me, like a season of something because
Right.
that has a start and end point. But knowing that it's not anyway, I've learned a lot about myself through this project. I've learned a lot about how I enjoy media and how I enjoy mystery specifically and what I
Nice.
like and what I don't. And you're right. I am one of those people that would much rather just have this very satisfying ending and I can just think about that instead of having to piece it together myself. Because I like solving puzzles. I don't like solving obtuse epitaphs. I don't like solving wishy-washy, you can interpret this how you want. There's a reason I went into mathematics in the sense of I like having
Concrete answers.
definite answers, like there is something they are going for, even within a range of certainty.
What I'm hearing is that you value truth. So one could call you the Witch of Truth?
I don't think I earned the title of witch, but I do.
We're referred to as witches by Bernkastel in this reading.
Yeah, I think it's a fair interpretation of what she's saying. Yeah.
I would be fine with that, but again, I don't know how I feel about the idea that I can be considered a witch when I am so focused. I care so little about the magic sorcery, like magic sorcery or whatnot still. Like, I just don't care. I want to know what happened on those islands still.
You are sounding more and more like Angie by the moment.
Yeah.
Got him there.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. But at the same time, I have some feelings about how they resolve a bunch of this, but I think those are self-evident in how I've approached the story so far. So I'm very interested to see how it finally resolves. The fact that like we still have it, we still have a whole nother chapter.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's crazy.
And I really want them to focus more on the why done it, which is antithetical to kind of what I've always said, which is I want them to lay it out for me. I wanted them to lay it out for me in this episode, and it's very clear, like, from what I'm seeing, that, like, I'm going to have to read the manga to get a lot more specifics.
Yeah.
But I want them to focus on the why done it within episode 8 is kind of what because right now that's the biggest question I have and the biggest thing that I need to tie this all together.
Yeah. That's kind of frustration I have where it's like, and a lot of these episodes in the answer arc, it's like, oh, we're teasing that the purpose of this arc is to go over this. And then they still kind of just like leave it dangling, in front of you at the end. It's like, okay, I get it. But I, as the reader, was kind of promised that we were going to really get into this.
Yeah.
Where is that resolution?
Yep, that is the danger of being vague. Some degrees of vagueness are too much for some people and not enough for other people. So, but I think between what we're going to do here and with the manga, I think they hit a nice medium. So I think people will be satisfied, and we'll figure out exactly how we want to navigate that.
I hope so. How long is the manga?
It's kind of long.
Like, when I say long, I mean like if you were to sit down and read it, would it take as many hours to read it as it does to read through the VN?
No, I think it's a little faster than that. It is 8 parts, and each part is like I want to say like 30 chapters, maybe.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've taken a look at that. I can look that up at some point in the future. But there's definitely some parts that, like, if you want to just get the parts that are different about the manga, there's like a couple of chapters in episode 7, and then kind of all of episode 8 is pretty different, which is interesting. It's kind of its own conversation about what they decided to do with episode 8 in the manga.
I was kind of thinking is that I wanted to read basically episode 7, or at least this last part. I'm fine with whatever changes that they made up until this point. If they made any changes in episodes 1 through 6 for the manga, great. Good on you. I don't really care. Like, I am really looking for those answers at this point that I kind of want to feel satisfied in that they actually can show their work. Because right now, I feel confident that they can, but I'm not seeing how they do it.
Yeah.
So
I think that's absolutely fair. So I think what we're going to try to do is we're going to finish up episode 7, just the VN, and then we'll have a discussion figuring out exactly where we want to insert some manga content, because I don't think we're going to do a whole manga arc. I don't think we're going to do a whole... So it's going to be a question of which parts we want to include. We've gotten some people saying that we should do the manga after reading the visual novel, and there's some reasoning for that. To not like taint your interpretation of the tale. There's a bunch of stuff we can get into, but that's going to be a whole separate conversation. So maybe we'll do a big debate over whether we should have it in the in the Discord, we'll probably have a big conversation about it. So
Wasn't it? It was Hayley that said she has no interest in the manga, right?
Hayley has no interest in a lot of things. It includes additional stuff you have to do. I'm surprised she took on the Epitaph. That was, I guess, that was her one. She chose this one big engagement, and then the rest are is she's like, nope, not doing that.
I cannot imagine after reading this reading, I cannot imagine doing that.
No.
Like,
I don't think there's any way a born and grown American could solve this.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest problems. Is you have to know like 3 languages. You have to be kind of pretty intimately familiar with where Japanese people lived in Southeast Asia. Yeah, like, there's a lot of stuff you have to know. And it's like
even Beato doesn't solve it without the starting point.
Yeah.
yeah.
But we'll get into that.
Genji gave the starting point, which I want to talk about the implications of that too, which I
Yes,
love,
we'll definitely get into
but
that.
we should probably start actually reading.
Yes, yeah, we'll hop into it real quick. Obviously Hayley is not here with us today, and this is the big Epitaph episode. We're going to do either we're going to or we're going to already have by the time this released. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to go. An episode where I talk specifically with Hayley about the Epitaph and other stuff, just because there were some scheduling conflicts. So, but don't worry, you will get your Hayley screaming at me about the Epitaph fix. So, all right. Well, this week we read about 2.5 hours of the VN, ending on the line, a beam of sunlight peeked through the clouds, looking like a staircase leading up to heaven, which is videos 126 through 128 of the YouTube playlist. Our story resumes 1 year later in 1984, 2 years until the crime. In the entry hall of the Ashurmiya mansion, Kinzo tasks Genji with overseeing the installation of the portrait of Beatrice and the mysterious epitaph. While they could understand Kinzo wanting to erect a portrait of the woman who had given him 10 tons of gold, Krause and Natsui have no idea what to make of the strange riddle-etched plaque. Back in the chapel, Will and Leon speculate that because this epitaph does not exist in Leon's world, Kinzo likely intended its riddle to choose his successor. However, if Kinzo suspected that Genji had actually secreted away Qwadori and Beatrice's child, he may have been intending for them to solve it instead. If such a miracle were to occur, the epitaph truly would have been a magic ritual to revive Beatrice. Act 8. Journey to the Golden Land. That night, Beatrice, still in her Beatrice the Elder form, visits the portrait and epitaph. Updating her persona with the latest lore drop, Beatrice decides to take on the epitaph's riddle so that she might properly revive. Everyone is abuzz at what this epitaph might mean. The servants gossip about the hidden gold and what this might mean for Krause's position as successor. Evan Hideyoshi likewise assume that solving it will grant whoever does so the headship. Questioning Genji about it, all he says is that the riddle applies equally to all who can see the epitaph. Kyrie believes that it likely depicts the location of the hidden gold, at the very least, but that solving it will not be easy. Rosa attempts to solve the epitaph herself, but can't seem to make much progress. She asks Maria if she has any insights, but to Maria, this is clearly an occult ritual to revive Beatrice's magic power. In a study, Kinzo tells Genji that this is his final gambit, to be reunited with Beatrice one last time. He asks Genji if this magic will grant him his miracle. In response, Genji asks Kinzo what he would do if Beatrice were to revive once again. After all, Genji knows of the way that Kinzo had twisted his relationship with the Qwadori and Beatrice. Kinzo tears up and says that he regrets the sins of his youth. Now he only wishes to apologize to Beatrice, no matter who they might be. Back in the chapel, Will and Clair explained to Leon that Kinzo and Genji were likely probing each other to see if they knew about Sayo's identity. The epitaph had never been meant for any of the family to solve and become the head. Its real purpose was a tool that Genji could use to reveal Sayo's true identity and to allow her to return to her rightful place in the family. Sayo would be allowed to solve the epitaph, and Beatrice would be revived.
So I have a couple thoughts on this.
Same.
I guess first is why, like, knowing the purpose of it, why were they so intent on pushing the family towards solving it in like episodes 1, 2, and 3?
Why did Beatrice try and get them to solve it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if that's been stated or not.
I don't think so. Is it literally just that I'm better than you? Like, because I solved this?
No, I don't think we know Beatrice's motivations yet for why the game starts. I think that's all included with that.
Well, I guess it could be to push Battler to do it, because if he can solve it,
Yes.
he would see the heart, and that's kind of what it was all about.
Yeah, I think we can speculate on why. I don't know if we get a definitive reason for. Some of it kind of comes up in a little bit later when Claire is talking about like the roulette of fate and like how the dead-end nature of their fate was. You could make the argument that the epitaph was kind of like emblematic of them becoming a witch. It kind of caused all this stuff. And so by saying like, hey, if anyone else can solve it, then clearly this was not fate, right? Then this was something that anyone could do. It's not that important, and therefore it kind of like
I guess
it kind of undercuts the power of the action, because they say that like they'll stop like killing all the family members if someone solves the epitaph. It seems like it's kind of like maybe a release valve or like a condition, because like when we talk about like the magic ritual nature of the whole thing, it's like, well, I've given you an out. Therefore, if you can't take it, then I am justified in doing everything I do. So I think there's a lot of things to kind of consider as to why that might be the case.
I definitely subscribe to that reasoning, especially what we see with Claire later. When she says that she leaves everything to fate, because Will has that comment when we're getting all of the solves at the end of episode 1 where he's like, that was such a risky game to begin with. I can't believe you actually made it through that. And she's like, that's what it means to to give yourself over to fate. So,
But then my issue with that is we see Eva and Erica / Battler solve it. So, like, I know there's the whole like, well, those episodes, do they really count because they weren't written by Beatrice, whatever.
Yeah, it legitimately is weird.
But I mean, depending on how canon you consider it.
Yeah, it is hard to square because like to be fair, we don't have the exact answers of what exactly goes on in those episodes, but in episode 3, theoretically, someone solves the epitaph and then people still die. Although some of that's maybe Eva, but...
And Eva gets all of her power. The whole thing that Beato keeps saying in episode 3 is like, I don't have power anymore. It's hers.
Yeah.
She has taken my power. So
I took that to that's such a good point. I love that point, Becca. My thing that I was thinking is Eva-Beatrice another one within Sayo?
Another Sayo personality?
I think it's Eva.
Yeah, I also thought that, so I want to be clear, like I just don't see the timing working out. Like you could fudge the age of Sayo like to be actually a little bit older, which weirdly enough makes a lot of weird things seem less weird if we want to go into ages.
Yeah.
And such.
Well, let's remember Genji lied about Sayo's age. Sayo is presenting as 3 years younger than they actually are.
Yes, that's what I mean, is that their age is actually...
They're 19.
More appropriate to George and Jessica than what had originally been presented as what Shannon and Kanon were.
Kind of puts in hindsight all the conversations we had, all the George hate, and Kyle just had to sit there and take it.
Yeah, it was really funny because, like, you talked about me gaslighting y'all when you were reading the previous bits. It's like, yeah, I never talking about, like, the age gap is so disgusting. Like, knowing secretly that the age gap is actually, like, part of the plot. I mean, it still is bad.
The age gap with George and Shannon was genuinely the least of my problems with George. That does not affect me at all. I do not give a fuck.
But it's something that we talked about a lot. I still love George.
I hate that guy.
I'm still a George stan, and this is something that Becca and I will always disagree on. I think George has some amazing lines either in the last episode. I wasn't here for the last episode. Like when he's talking about Battler and enjoying his life, I just think that is like such a great thing to say. And I know it's like whatever, but like they all seem genuinely like happy for him, and I'm just
who's
like,
gonna tell him? Who's gonna tell him?
Ben.
Yeah, Ben, you may not have heard this conversation then, yeah.
Right.
What did I miss?
Forgot. Okay. So here's the thing.
This is speculation. This is not certain, but...
Here's the thing. The evidence exists to support what I am about to say. I think that there was a letter for Shannon in that envelope that George either hid from Shannon or even if there wasn't, he still hands her the empty envelope knowing that they had feelings for each other, knowing that it would hurt her, knowing that he is essentially negging her in that moment, and also talking about how happy Battler must be living his life away from all of them is rubbing salt in all of her wounds. And he obviously can't know the extent of the hurt that he is causing, obviously, because he doesn't know what's in her mind or in her heart.
I'm learning.
But he knows that she had feelings for him, and he knows that he is hurting her on some level by saying all of that, because as has been previously established from his own mouth, he was super jealous of their relationship. So
I
hate that guy.
I get it, but I get it.
Here's the thing. I also think he is genuinely happy for his cousin. Like, I think both things are true. I don't think your read is wrong.
Yeah, but that is something I had not thought about, and obviously I wasn't here for the last episode, so I couldn't be here to debate you on that. I don't see anything wrong with that take. I am just not personally subscribed to that take as of right now, unless we got more information.
And I don't think we're going to.
Because there is, and I don't think we're going to. I agree, but I'm trying to read Kyle's face right now, actually. I don't know if you talked about whether or not we would get more. We didn't get more in this reading, that's for sure. But we have all of episode 8. I think we have all of episode 8
Yeah, no, there's no more info on that.
to talk about the love between Sayo and their 3 personalities and the 3 different cousins. Like,
Mm.
we have all of episode 8 to talk about, because I think a lot of episode 8, in my opinion, will focus on those 6/4 people rather than any of the adults.
Mm.
It will also focus on Maria and Angie, but I don't care about them.
Becca and I had a wild theory in the comment. She and I talked a lot last week about our read and our thoughts of what was going on. Is this something that we could bring up? Like, is this the appropriate place to bring up with?
This was something I wanted to talk about more with Hayley. Are you talking about the witches?
Yeah.
This was something I was hoping to talk about with all of us. I think we can bring it up now because my theory has also evolved since we last talked about it. It's still mostly the same, but
What I was thinking of leads off of that conversation, which is like who Sayo becomes, assuming that they get off the island and survive, and how they interact with the other Shiromiyas.
this is actually a point on which we differ. So if you want to talk about that one, please go ahead.
Oh, all right. So there's not really a better point to bring it up when we're here now. This isn't where I thought this break in the synopsis was going to go. So my theory is that Amakusa is just another personality of Sayo's, and they do survive off the island, right? Becca thinks that's hilarious because this is apparently not what you thought I was going to say.
No, it's not. I thought you were going to say one of the other things we talked about, but I don't know if you think that's true anymore.
There's a lot of viable options for this theory. So.
Yeah.
Well, so then if that is the case, then Amakusa and Angie have kind of an intertwined heart, so to speak. And then looking at how...
Yeah, there's thematic resonance with that, yeah.
Right. And
it
then
would complete what I call the Beato seduction run of all of the Shiromia grandchildren.
Cousins, yes. with Mariage Sorcerer being like what is a bit more appropriate for a 9-year-old, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like when I say seduction run, I'm using that term very loosely in that she becomes like the most important person in the lives of all 5 of them, if you include Angie.
Yeah, which is wild, crazy. And I think the only evidence to suggest that, other than like the vibe is kind of there with the art style, which again we're watching with the mod, so it's not the original art, is that in episode 3, Beatrice starts talking about how much art and mangas and video games and anime she watches. And it's just like, is that appropriate for 1986? Like, that sounds a bit more 1999. I can't remember when Angie's story kicks off. And to me, that sounds like somebody in the present, which would only be possible if she survives. But then you can go back and forth and say, well, that's not episode 1 and 2, which are the ones written by Beatrice, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Oh, the story is already inconsistent in that regard. Later on in this episode, Clair is like, at the end of my games, episode 4, and it's like, well, you didn't write episode 4. What are you talking about? So, yeah, even the end is inconsistent.
Oh, I mean, we only get that line that episodes 3 and 4 aren't really Beatrice in episode 6. So that could be a lie. And it's just like, at some point, you just got to draw a line and like declare your own thing that makes sense until we get further pieces of information.
True.
I guess this is also a time to bring this up. There's an interesting statement here that was said much later in the novel that I didn't read close enough to see if Kyle included, where when the cat box is opened, the mansion is gone and Eva is left alive.
Yes.
Which I find very interesting. Does that mean that Eva has to live through every single one for it to be a real world? And that is my thinking is yes.
Yeah.
That was also a question I had.
Somehow Eva has to live, because otherwise it's not a viable world, and it doesn't connect both for at the closing of the cat box and the opening. And the mansion has to get kaboomed at some point.
Right.
Which we still don't know how.
No, we don't.
I think I know how.
I mean, I have a theory.
I do
but-
think I
Okay.
know how.
Kaboom.
Yeah, we'll get to that. That is one of the big reveals at the not reveals, but the big things that happens in the big salt that Will does. Before we move on, I also did want to take this point to stop and talk about something that one of the commenters on YouTube brought up that was something that we kind of need to talk about in general, and that is about the question of Sayo's personalities, identities, personas. What exactly is going on there? Because that is a topic that is kind of generally kind of complicated, especially when you start throwing around medicalized terms like dissociative identity disorder or things like systems and alters. There's a lot of really confusing, like pop culture terminology used to describe this kind of stuff that is not very accurate. And I just want to make sure that we are trying to use terms that are, cause like this is one of those things like we don't want to perpetuate like myths about a thing that actual people go through in a way that like perpetuates stuff that just isn't true. So they were kind of just largely bringing up the fact that probably it's unlikely that they're experiencing specifically dissociative identity disorder because we don't ever see like a forced switching of the identities, which is one of the things about sort of dissociative identity disorder specifically, where there's like losses of time and like swapping between identities, which does not really seem to be the case. Although, again, this is the problem with this kind of medium is that, well, we're seeing a lot of stuff that is clearly being made more vague, couched in metaphor. Like, if, for example, the scene where Beatrice takes over Yasuo's body to put the key in her locker. You could make the case that that's an example of exactly that. But of course, that scene is also clearly not literally what happened because physically that prank has to have planning, right? Like it wasn't like, and then Yasuo's body was taken over by the Beatrice personality who retroactively hid the key. Like that obviously doesn't work. So we know for a fact that there's metaphorical aspects of what we're being shown. And so that makes all this really difficult. And on top of that, 15-year-old VN, written by a guy who probably was not a medical professional on a topic very misunderstood. So It's difficult to distinguish between Ryukishi doing his damn best to describe an actual medical disorder versus him using it kind of as a metaphor for some other things he wants to talk about. In that case, the alternative for that is like Sayo's, trying to reconcile different aspects of themselves. They're versions of themselves they can see themselves becoming, and they're unsure who they want to be. And I think that has a more thematic resonance with the rest of the story. We can talk specifically about that. And of course, the manga adds more detail. There's also some stuff outside of the VN that gives more direct line into Sayo's thoughts, right? That is a more objective, which we can kind of use to say that it probably isn't dissociative identity disorder. That is such a mouthful. Dissociative identity disorder, and probably something more along the lines of these are the different people that Sayo could be, wants to be, different faces that she puts on for different situations. Because that's like kind of thematically what they talk about in like episode 2, when there's talking like Jessica is Jessie at school, and like you can be a different person when you're with different people. Lambda Delta even says like, oh, I put on my sweet voice when talking to Daddy. Like that's am I different? Like that's a different voice during different people, like stuff like that. So I think thematically, it's trying to imply more along the lines of these are embodiments of trying to come to terms with identity more so than Tulpa-like personalities.
I would also like to add on to that, Kyle, what you were just saying about thematically testing out who they are and figuring out who they are. I think the great tragedy of Yasu or Sayo is that they are always externalizing that struggle and they are always trying to figure out who they are in relation to someone else in their life.
Right.
It's never for themselves. It's always in the context of this is who I am to Maria, or this is who I am to Battler, this is who I am to Shannon, or I'm sorry, this is who I am to Jessica, not Shannon. So I think that is the tragedy, is that they feel like, and it's even, we see it with her and Maria in the Golden Land at the end of episode 4, where Angie comes to get them out. And Beatrice doesn't want Maria to leave because she can't have a universe without two people. And Angie says, that means you're not a real witch. And it's because she can't figure out who she is if she's not in relation to another person, which is very sad.
Yeah, sorry to have to do a big spiel there. Kind of, it's one of those things you really want to not let linger, and want to make sure we're talking about it in a way that is, appropriate. Was there anything else you wanted to hit on that topic before we move on?
I mean, I have a lot to hit on that topic, but I think it comes later in the reading. I think that it's still, even after all that's being said, I think it's still appropriate to refer to them as different personalities. Like,
I think that's fair because like that's what they are. Like they're
named.
They're named personas, yeah.
So, like that, they even have a huge thing about names. Like, but to call them different people doesn't feel correct as there is a definition of a person, as there are so many people on this island. So then
Yes.
maybe I'll just do a disclaimer here. Like, when I say personality, I just mean the different sides of Sayo that we are seeing, because they even specifically say that Maria knows who Beatrice is when they come up and talk to them. Like, I think that's a big part of it, is that whatever body is being inhabited by whatever Sayo is doing, the way that she is presenting to Maria as Beatrice, that is their personality. Like, not to say that any of the other ones are any less personality than Beatrice, but they all inhabit the same personality.
So where I've kind of landed on it is, yes, they are separate personalities, but I just don't want to be ascribing an actual name of a disorder to something that is inherently fictional.
Absolutely true.
Because even if we know that Rikishi has a background in social work and has worked with people in situations like this before, so, it's easy to believe that this was probably a very good faith rendering at the time of someone struggling with something very similar to DID. But it is also a fictional story. And even if you're trying to tell the most realistic portrayal of a disorder like that in good faith, you are also serving a fictional narrative. There's always going to be some element of it that is fictionalized. And I really appreciate that reader for pointing that out, because, I sympathize with my own things that people like to make light of on the internet. So we just wanted to make sure we address that. So thank you for bringing that up, Kyle.
Yeah, and that's part of a broader problem that fiction often has, where, like, if there's like a pop culture understanding of something, it's actually really hard to correct that in the story without making it the entire point of your story. Because, like, either you include it the way that people will understand it, and they just move past it, it acts normally within the story. But if you actually try to depict it correctly, people will get hung up on them. Like, well, that's not how that works, even though they're wrong, right? And then you have to like explain it, and then your story is now about that as opposed to being part of the story. It's a whole mess, and that we see that time and time again with a lot of stuff that's tricky like this. So at least Rikishi does seem to at least be trying to have something to say on this regard. I'm not trying to make it like, oh, there's a person with multiple personalities doing killings. Like, I don't think that's their intent, but it is unfortunately it is in the text. Like, it is undeniable that the visual novel, if you're just reading the visual novel, that interpretation is just there. You're not wrong to read that from what is presented. So I think it's a valid critique of this story in that it does, leave that on the table in a way that I think is a little reckless on Rikishi's part, if that was not what he was trying to accomplish.
When it comes to somebody who has, for lack of a more deep definition, a complex relationship with their own identity, the illusions are there for somebody who's trans, non-binary, you prefer Zim, things like that. The only clear-cut answer is to ask them how they want to be identified. The only evidence that I see of that we've gotten so far is the fact that the red text is true to say both there are at least 17, there are also no more than like 16. Right? That is coming from Beatrice themselves to kind of acknowledge that, hey, Shannon, Kanon, myself are all real, but at the same time we are but one person.
Right.
So it's like not acknowledging that we are individual people. We are more complicated, that we are all but one. So the other line that like comes to me is a brief line from Adventure Time, which is something along the lines of, when talking about someone else's identity, which is like, oh, I just don't get why they would do that. And the response is, we don't need to understand it. We just need to respect it. That is their decision. That's how they are, or how they want to be, or how they're figuring themselves out. And I feel it just applies here, that I don't need to understand that this is DID. I don't need to understand that this is Sayo warring with themselves on who they want to be, because I mean, it's not just DID, I think, because we have these characters on screen arguing with themselves about, well, we're furniture, we can't do this, we have to do this. It's like, maybe we can. And this is what it would look like. Can you fathom that? We have our limitations because we are but within one body. And just accepting that this is a character who is at war with themselves on what to do here is kind of all we really need to know to understand it. So I don't know how much I feel the need to put a hard definition on someone's identity when they are comfortable with where they're at. until you get to the point where it's like you understanding who you are is going to save a dozen people from being murdered.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's tricky when you're doing like media analysis, right? Because like it's obviously different if we're talking about like an actual living person. Do not guess about someone's like state in terms of like their identity like this if they're a real person. That's fucked up.
Yeah.
But what we're doing here is we're talking about a fictional character and we're trying to understand them, right? And obviously, it's perfectly okay to speculate they might have DID or they might be a system or they might just be a person who is pretending to be like this sometimes, right? Those are all valid things to think about.
Especially when this person is vying to have somebody understand them. Like that is the whole point.
Yeah.
They want to be seen and understood because they struggle to see and understand themselves, perhaps.
And I think it's all really good, especially as long as we are not, then taking those assumptions and then putting them onto real people in real life. That's kind of the part of the problem with just in general with that kind of stuff. It's you really can't avoid like your media affecting your opinions of real life. That's kind of the inherent problem with including these kind of problematic depictions is that people just kind of absorb these things. And that's why it's important to have this kind of conversation to contextualize that, to make sure we're understanding like, hey, we are talking about a speculative thing. We are not going to then carry that into how we, what would act if we met someone in real life and be like, oh my God, you have, DID, you're a system. That means one of your personalities might be a murderer. Like that would be really shitty. Like obviously you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that bleeds through into the zeitgeist when you uncritically have this kind of stuff in your media. So,
and that's like if I were to sit down and interview Ryukishi, like one of my questions would be like, look, did you look for an interesting puzzle piece or solution to a murder mystery, or did you want to kind of dive into this discussion about identity as the crux of a story first and foremost, and this is what it evolved into? I have my own personal thought on probably where that started, but that's such a complicated question for a complicated answer that I wouldn't even want to start guessing as to what their intentions were. Anyway, I had one more thing to bring before we move on to the synopsis.
As a note, we are 50 minutes in and we have read like 3 paragraphs. I'm not saying to stop, but I just want to make sure that we
I don't feel like Kyle go. Like there's a point where we just sit there and be like, all right, let's get through the plot.
Yeah, sorry, I had to give a lecture real quick.
That's fine.
Yeah. Welcome to my TED Talk about media literacy and the dangers of interpretation.
Kyle, future Kyle, cut that all out. Capelli go.
Yeah, cut it out. Yeah, we'll make it the post credits dialogue, just 20-30 minutes of that. The last thing I wanted to mention before we move on to the next part of the plot is Kinzo seemingly knowing that Sayo is the child from 19 years ago, or at this point 17 years ago. I just feel like that's just a weird, I don't want to call it a plot hole.
Yeah.
But it sure does feel...
I don't think it's that weird.
Okay. To clarify, the Vega does like actually give an exact reason of how Kinzo finds out. So you're not wrong for noting that it's a little odd.
Yeah. Well, just because it's just like the relationship between Kinzo and Genji in this scene is just off-putting. Like it doesn't line up completely with what we've come to understand about either character. Right? Like I can understand the rationale to get to this. Well, like Genji's whole thing was trying to protect the child from Kinzo because what if he does an unspeakable sin yet again? If he's unhappy with the...
Are we sure about that, though?
Yeah. So that is
I don't know if we're sure. I'm no longer sure about that.
There was definitely a big conversation to have about who was Genji serving with this? Was Genji serving Sayo or is Genji serving Kinzo by the way that he did all this?
Or is Genji serving Genji?
Or that, yeah.
There's legitimately a case we made for that. Although that requires some speculation about Genji. And in my opinion, so this is a kind of a wild speculation. So we know that Runaway is Genji's like double, right? It is Sayo's like interpretation of Genji as a magical character that they use for being like a magical butler in their storytelling with Maria, right? Is representative of Genji. Runaway has very queer energy. I think you can make the case that Genji is possibly a gay man who has feelings for Kinzo and has devoted himself to Kinzo through his first entire life as a servant because of that. And quite possibly, and for that reason, was willing to, let Sayo be a really unhappy life because it would eventually serve as a tool to make Kinzo feel better about the time that he raped her mother. Like, there's definitely you can interpret that as possibly a read of what's happening. And that sucks.
Even if he's not a gay man in love with Kinzo, that was kind of where I landed, just knowing that they have a long and historic friendship.
Yes.
Especially, let's put a pin in this and talk about it when we get to that scene when
Yes.
Kinzo gets to apologize.
That's a good place to bring it up. I will just say for the fact I did not read that way whatsoever, and I thought it was serving Sayo much more than it was serving Kinzo.
Yeah, I mean, there's no definitive answer here. This is just speculation.
We don't get enough of Genji's point of view to have a concrete route either way.
Yeah.
We have nothing but context clues.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have a more conversation once we get to that part of the story where we can kind of suss out, because Genji's actions don't make a lot of sense, no matter what he says his motives were. Like, some people made some bizarre choices involving possibly giving a baby a sex change and raising them as a different gender for no real reason. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that is very questionable that we don't really have a lot of context for. So, and we are going to get a little bit more context on that, so we'll talk about that more later. But definitely something to think about. Well, what exactly was Genji's plan? And I as someone who knows more, I still am not entirely sure what they were going for. So it kind of makes it hard to say definitively this means X because Genji wouldn't do that. And it's like, well, that's all speculation anyway. So we will talk about that more later.
Gosh, Kyle, let's move on already. Jeez, man.
I know. I'm sorry. Jeez. I'm definitely going to cut some of that entire speech. There's some parts that I don't think we need to go that, but
I do think
just
we
for
repeated
time.
ourselves 3 times.
For sure.
But not as bad as some of us usually do.
Or as bad as Ryukishi07 does.
Ugh.
True.
Oh my god. Okay, speaking of which, this is a small tangent. There's a part we're about to get later on in the summary where Ryukishi is talking about and the mystery of the heart that they want someone to solve their mystery, and he says it fucking 4 times. Almost the exact same line, 4 fucking times. I'm like, oh god.
Reading that today, I was like, Jesus Christ, I got it.
We then cut to one of Beatrice and Maria's witch tea parties. Maria, using her vast occult knowledge, provides names for Gap and Ronove based on the 72 great demons of Ars Goetia. As a part of their partnership, Mariage Sorciere, they would help each other to further develop their magical worlds. Maria would teach Beatrice about the occult, and Beatrice would draw personifications of Maria's many imaginary friends for her. By giving these entities names, forms, and personalities, and having them interact with each other, their existences become more firm, and their magic power grows. Not wanting to be left behind by the sheer number of minions Maria has, Beatrice decides to make some lively new ones herself using some dark tools she found in Goldsmith's storehouse as their vessels. While Maria was fully entranced by this game of Mariage Sorciere, Beatrice can't help but feel like something is missing. It takes 2 to create a universe, and while this universe she has created with Maria was fun, Maria was not the second person that Beatrice truly wished to make a universe with. It had been 4 years since Battler had said that he would come back for her. While part of her has accepted that he won't be returning, the roots of love in her heart refuse to die and allow her to move on. Without this incomplete universe she has created with Maria, though, she would surely have withered away long ago. When Beatrice accidentally lets her inner sadness show for a moment and says aloud that she is not complete, Maria urges Beatrice to perform the resurrection ritual of the Epitaph to regain her power. Beatrice wonders if the miracle of a complete stranger solving the Epitaph would restore her to her witch's power to grant her own miracles.
Do you guys think that the world that she wants to make with Battler is Umineko, or is it the metaverse?
Next question, please.
I don't think it's either of them. I think I think her world that she would have made with Battler would have been a golden land of a different flavor, because the current golden land we have is very much the Rose Garden.
But again, it goes back to my theory that this was all something that she had been working on in case he comes back, just to create a game for him to play within a mystery story, right? Which kind of leads in a little bit to, had Battler shown up a year earlier or later, it would not have been something that they actively acted on.
Well, I've also changed my tune about that, especially with this reading, with the way that Claire later on says, that's what it is to leave yourself to fate. I genuinely think there is an element of winging it to all of this.
Yeah, I think it's more metaphorical because they use a similar metaphor when Kyrie is talking about her love with Rudolph and how it was stolen from her. There's very similar metaphor usage about the seed of love and growing the fruit of love and it being stolen and the building of the world between 2 people. I think it's more of the metaphor of the life that she would have built with Battler.
Yeah.
Mm.
I did like the reveal that the 7 stakes were being stored in the shed. Why were they stored in the shed? Probably because Kinzo bought them thinking they were authentic and then found out they were paperweights and didn't give a fuck about them and stuck them in the shed.
They're canonically, they're like fake paperweights, made in America.
There's no such thing as a fake paperweight. If it can weigh down paper, it's a paperweight.
They're fake.
That is true.
They're fake.
Ritual
They're fake
stakes.
occults.
Yeah.
But I also was like, my first thought was, did she find the guns in there? And then Kyle pointed out, oh no, the guns come from the study. But the Chiester sisters are definitely just the guns, like the shotgun, and there's Winchester rifles as well, which explains why we get like exploded heads and things from the shotgun.
I don't know how I never caught on to this. You're so right.
A rifle bullet isn't anything to sneeze at either, but like the rifle offers more precision and range. So there you go.
I've never heard a bullet go.
They made some liberties, maybe.
Yeah, you're pretty lucky then. Because if you're hearing that, it's too late.
True, so true.
And people are always saying the gunshots sound different in real life than they do in media. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's because they actually sound like a weird witchy laugh and then a
No wonder all that glass has been breaking.
There's so much glass. Remember in episode 1 when we thought that would mean something, Capelli?
Innocent times.
Yeah, right.
Later, we see Beatrice standing in front of her portrait once again, contemplating the epitaph. However, with so little to go on, she really has no way to even begin to try and solve it. Feeling the stab of the anti-magic toxin, Beatrice erases her form as Genji, Shannon, and Kanon approach. Genji tells them that Kinzo believes that the soul of Beatrice-sama will dwell within the one who solves this inscrutable riddle, and asks them if they are attempting to solve it. When Shannon says that she doesn't think she would be able to, Genji suddenly tells the two of them that Kinzo's beloved hometown was not Odawara, but in fact Taiwan. He then tells Shannon that she too must try and solve the riddle of the epitaph, as the more people who try and solve it, the more magical power the ritual gains. Once they've left, Beatrice reappears and continues her contemplation. Recognizing that Genji must have been giving a valuable hint, Beatrice decides to seek out an atlas with maps of Taiwan in the book archive. However, even with a map of Taiwan in hand, the prospect of finding the right hometown or river was still unimaginable. After giving up and throwing the atlas to the ground, though, Beatrice notices that the book had fallen to a page talking about the major rivers of Taiwan. Seeing this as a sign of good fortune, she continues to investigate until she finds a river whose name literally translates as Freshwater River, the Tamsui River. Since sweet fish are a freshwater fish, and thus can be found in almost any river, Beatrice wonders if this freshwater river and the harbor town it ends at, by the same name, could be what the sweet fish line is hinting towards.
Just like we all suspected.
I don't care about the epitaph. I'll be very clear. All of the explanation, don't care.
It's all so opaque.
Yeah.
It's dumb.
I think it's neat. I want to be clear.
Yeah.
I think it's neat,
Sure,
but I also don't care, like, about the construction of it. What I do care about is the fact that Genji is walking with Shannon and Ken, as very clearly described, as if nothing is wrong. So my question is Genji aware that there are two personalities that are peeking out in this, sometimes one following right another, saying different things? Does it even like click to them? And obviously we talked about how Genji does, like, we don't have enough like background into whatever is going on in their mind. But the fact that there are sometimes like those are two like Shannon will say something, then Kanon will say something.
Yeah.
I was looking very clearly. None of it reads like it couldn't have just been one person that says a thing and then says another follow-up thought right after.
I think this is why Ghoda thinks Shannon and Kanon are so fucking weird.
Yeah.
I think Nanjo Kumasawa and Genji are all used to this because they know what the fuck is up with them, understands that something happened at some point when Sayo was young to cause some kind of a split, and that there are multiple people embodying this one body that they have. But I think they keep that a secret from Ghoda, and Ghoda is like, why the fuck are you talking to yourself like that? That's why Ghoda is creeped out by them.
Yes, I don't know if Ghoda's creeped out by them. I don't know if that's ever.
I never got that read either.
Maybe not creeped out, but Ghoda thinks they're incompetent. And there is stuff I remember reading in episodes, like in some of the early episodes, where Ghoda is like, what is up with you? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel,
that's fair. I do feel like Ghoda...
And that's why they hate Ghoda.
Yeah, I agree that that's why they hate Ghoda. I think also the fact that if you're only counting 4 total bodies of servants that are on the island at the time
Mhm.
of this thing happening, one is very clearly left out. Why is the young servant here when Ghoda, Kumasawa, and Genji are the other 3? And, like, yes, he could easily talk down to one young servant who's like that instead of just talking down to necessarily 2. I think that's actually socially a lot harder if there were 2 young people, because then it's like, well, they have 2 people here, they're splitting the duties, whatever. This is one body. So I think that what you're saying a little bit lines up. I never got the idea that Ghoda was creeped out by them, just that he thought he was better than them.
Hmm.
Creeped out was maybe like too strong of a term, but I definitely got the sense that Ghoda thinks there's something up with them, thinks there's something weird about them, but maybe that was just me reading way into certain things. But that was just something that I have. Honestly, we've been reading this for so long, I can't remember exactly why that's a belief I have.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
But
That's fair.
but it is something that I just kind of had in my mind that Ghoda doesn't like Shannon and Kanon and thinks there's something off about them, even if he can't place it.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know of any off the top of my head that like corroborates that in the text, but I can't deny it either. I don't know.
Maybe it's just my intuition.
Maybe.
Well, if you flip the chessboard around, that's it.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, this is the start of the solution of the Epitaph. We'll definitely talk more about this with Hayley specifically. Genji comes out and says, "Hey, you need to look at Taiwan." An answer that is critical to starting the critical path towards solving the Epitaph. Without that, you are so screwed. It is so hard to figure out what is going on with this Epitaph because, as we're about to find out, you don't get like almost any confirmation until you arrive at Qilian Station. Until you get to like near the end of it. That's the first time you're like, "Oh wait, there's the thing." Like up until that, you're just pure speculation on speculation on speculation. And so that's one of the things that makes this so difficult to solve is that you just have no feedback until you have it pretty much all the way solved.
And the fact that the one hint you get to Taiwan is that one time Krauss talks about
Areca nuts, yeah.
Kinzo liking areca nuts. I remember us talking about it in the podcast. So when it came up here, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I was like, I've been watching a lot of Columbo, and that is a show where he like notices the tiniest details about things, and that's how he gets his murderers. I feel like even Columbo would have a hard time with that one. That was crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, on top of that, areca nuts are popular in a lot of countries in that area. And when they talk about like when they want a vacation, they want a vacation to a lot of countries in that area. So like it doesn't actually narrow it down just to Taiwan. It narrows it down to like a few Southeastern Asian countries. But again, like this is one of those things where it's like, well, if you knew Japanese cultural history, that like people in Japan often would go and live in Taiwan during that time period. If you don't know that, then there's no particular reason to land on Taiwan, really. But if you do know that, then you're like, oh yeah, Taiwan. That clearly is pointing at Taiwan. So like it's one of the many things. It's like, yeah, I guess.
Just so whack. So whack on so many levels. This was also why when Hayley started talking about it early in the podcast, I was like, "Oh, you actually have like a good line on this," and I haven't the faintest idea, and I have a feeling a lot of it has to do with Japanese characters, and I simply did not have that kind of time on my hands.
Yeah.
So I gave up immediately.
Yep.
So I'm really looking forward to what she comes up with.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. All right, well, let's go ahead and run through the rest of this epitaph real quick because it's more of exactly that kind of garbage. Well, not garbage. It is interesting. It's just, I mean, it is what it is.
When you have this long form story with this big like mystery that the characters are centered around and being encouraged to solve it, knowing that you, the reader, didn't have a chance in hell, it kind of sucks.
It kind of sucks, yeah. Like there is information to theoretically solve it, but I don't think it's entirely fair. I think my personal opinion is the epitaph is meant to be an ARG. It is not meant for any one person to solve. It is something that was like there for a bunch of people to put their heads together and then like kind of piece together over a long period of time. And from that lens, it makes a lot more sense. And then it also makes more sense that it's like a miracle that any one person actually could solve it, like within that context. So, returning to the chapel, Clair tells us that they spent many nights poring over that map of Taiwan. Will confirms that Eva and Fruta Erica had used an atlas from the book archive before they had solved the epitaph in their respective games. Some vital clue for solving the epitaph was definitely hidden in a map of Taiwan. However, as we know from previous games, the Sweet Fish River described in the epitaph does not actually refer to a literal river. Will keeps prodding Leon to try and figure it out, and Bernkastel eventually tells him to stop being annoying and give the answer clearly. Will says there is something other than a river with the name Tamsui that transports things and flows up and down, the Tamsui railway line. And as you travel down that rail line, you eventually find a station whose old name from the time when Kinzo would have lived there contains the characters for village, shore, and mouth, Qilian Station. However, Even if they did find the location where the key was said to sleep, how was Clair supposed to find it in such a large location without being able to leave Rokkenjiima? Undeterred, they began working on the next line of the epitaph. On the first twilight, sacrifice the 6 chosen by the key. If Qilian could be reached with word games, then surely the 6 chosen by the key would be similar. And so they searched for anything related to the number 6. Leon speculates that perhaps there exists a way to split Qilian's 3 characters into 6, and Will points out that Qilian is only 3 characters in Japanese. When using the local Chinese pronunciation and writing it in English, you get Qilian, a 6-letter word. But even with the key in hand, how are you supposed to sacrifice them? With the context of the rest of the Twilights, you can deduce that there is some larger phrase from which you are removing the letters as indicated by the key. However, what that larger phrase is was a riddle all of its own. Oh god, this part of the epitaph, this part all makes sense. This next part is horse shit. If you don't just know Japanese, even if you do, it's so wild. And this may just be because English doesn't really have the equivalent of like, if you read this character in this word as this thing, it means this. But if you read it as this thing, it means 10 quadrillion. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Japanese is incredibly complicated.
Will lays out the theory that Rosa had told to Battler in the 5th game, before he and Erica solved the epitaph themselves. Because the phrase, home of the gold, rather than golden land, was only used in the 10th Twilight, and it contains a kanji that can be read as kyo, Rosa speculated that the epitaph was describing a 10-day trip from Kinzo's hometown to Kyoto. The first Twilight would then be 1/10 of this journey, and that location might indicate how one was to go about offering the sacrifices chosen by the key. However, as Will notes, the kanji that Rosa had read as kyo can also be read as k, which represents an enormous number. Given that the key Qilian is intended to be read as an English word, this number was likely also intended to be the same, and that English word was quadrillion, which, as Curie and Battler had suspected in the previous games, is an 11-letter word. And since quadrillion contains all the letters of Qilian, you can sacrifice them, resulting in the 5 letters necessary to perform the kills of the rest of the Twilights. Of course, at this point, this is all hypothetical. The only way to actually confirm any of this is to find the actual mechanism and perform the actions. But to anyone who lives on Rokkenjiima, the word quadrillion can only make you think of one place, the chapel.
Yet again, something that is mentioned exactly one time.
Yes. Well, actually, so okay, let's talk about that part of solving the epitaph. So when we first introduce the chapel, Battler notices that, like, hey, there's this thing above the thing, entryway, and it says, you will be rewarded on a probability of, he's like, I can't read that word, to 1. He actually literally just leaves out the word quadrillion in his translation of the thing. And he's like, what is the word in English that it's like? It goes like MBTQ? And like George explains that part. 'Cause he's talking about million, billion, trillion, quadrillion. Like they're laying out like the words in English for those high numbers. So that's all we get in episode 2. In episode 4, when go to visit Kumasawa's children in the Angie timeline, Kumasawa has like a picture of the chapel and has written the actual full phrase there. That's the first time we actually see that the full phrase is, you will be rewarded in a chance of 1 in a quadrillion or whatever. So yeah, in some ways you could say like, well, the fact that they obscured it makes it more obvious. The chapel is also obviously like probably involved in all this because it's such a weird place to exist in the first place. But yeah, pretty wild. Oh, here's another fun fact. So there you go.
No, you say your fun fact, and then I'll say why it's probably not fun.
So the key thing to this whole thing is the word quadrillion. Quadrillion is also used by Umineko for like they have occasional pop-up shops or like pop-up tea shops they have in Japan that they put on, and it's called Quadrillion. It's the name of the tea shop or the little pop-up store. And one of the reasons why it's called that is because if you, I don't know the right term for it, like anglicize whatever Kuadorian.
Romanize it.
Romanize it, thank you. If you Romanize Kuadorian, if you try and pronounce quadrillion, it sounds very similar to Kuadorian.
Yes. Oh my god, it does. Fuck. Kuadorian. Yeah.
Quadrillion.
It does not help you solve this at all, but it is
I
a fun
hate
Easter
that.
egg. Yeah.
So I am specifically saying that was not a fun fact. And then second, I think that one of my favorite parts about mysteries is like seeing where they reference specific things that that you led up for this and be like, here were all the clues that you probably missed, and like going, I love that part of a mystery, of a reveal. I just read the 4th Ernest Cunningham book of the series, like Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. Great read. Go read the 4th one, which is about a bank heist. It's great. But like I love seeing those sort of things. So when you're talking about like in the 2nd episode this happened, in the 4th episode this happened, I find this more entertaining about the clues that they left to this, more entertaining than the actual solve. because to me, I care a lot more about how the clues are constructed in a way that you could have theoretically solved this. However, this all is still bullshit.
Yes, it is definitively bullshit. If you're interested in that, Ben, I did make a document for Hayley that laid out, like, here's explicitly all the information we have, and it has, like, gated hints and stuff. So if you want to go see, like, what walking through the solution of the Epitaph would actually look like based on the information we have, that is a document that we have on the Google Docs. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please send that to me. Thanks.
So you can know exactly, like, what Hayley was dealing with and how, like, it's you're really, like, even when you're given the exact literal lines of information you need to solve the Epitaph, it still sucks. It's still bullshit. And that was with me going back and saying, like, I'm going to pull out literally the only lines from the story that are relevant to solving the Epitaph, and it's still, like, impenetrable. It's crazy. Epitaph solving continued. Returning to Claire's story, we see Beatrice arriving at the mysterious chapel that they were all told to stay away from. There above the door were a set of English words displayed in relief. You will be blessed only at a probability of a quadrillion to 1. If this relief were to contain a secret mechanism, as Beatrice suspected, then Kinzo must have created this riddle long ago, with the plans to someday use it for selecting his successor. And while the servants did clean up the chapel on occasion, as we had seen when Beatrice had first met Shannon, she notes that Genji had always handled polishing this relief himself, likely making sure that no one could accidentally discover the mechanism it hid. After climbing up to inspect the letters, the method of sacrifice becomes immediately apparent. Each letter in Quadrillion is a removable key. From that point, performing the steps of the first 2 twilights are trivial. Removing the letters of Qilian to perform the first twilight, sacrifice the 6 chosen by the key, and then separating the D and R that are touching for the second twilight, tear apart the 2 who are close. The third twilight is somewhat tricky. How does one then go about praising a noble name? Treating it as another word game, Beatrice contemplates how to make the letters U, D, R, L, and O praise Kinzo's name. The U likely represents the name Ushirimiya, but then what can D, R, L, and O stand for? Of course, Derulo, Jason Derulo. No, like any amateur Wordle player, Beatrice begins shuffling the remaining letters around, trying to make a word that could somehow be interpreted as praise. Eventually, she lands on the answer, Lord U. I'll pause there.
I laughed so hard.
So hard.
Ben face palmed so heavily.
That was so good.
The
Please,
wonder with which
please.
you delivered that was really impressive.
Please put a soundbite in the podcast of Jason Derulo saying his own name.
We'll see. We'll see.
All right.
Oh, man.
Capelli wants to go to bed. I know. I need to stop.
I don't know who this person is.
Jason Derulo.
Jason
Famous
Derulo.
singer. He just, like, he's famous for being very full of himself. He was in Cats 2019.
That's still wild.
Yeah, I'm seeing some unflattering web results on his name right now.
He also always says his own name in his songs.
Yes.
Which is what I was referencing.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he always just like says his own Jason Derulo.
Well, I'm sure Kyle feels very proud of himself for that one.
It was
I did. I
It
very
was
much enjoyed that when I read it.
so good.
Interpreting the gouge and kill remaining twilight as instructions to turn and then remove each remaining rearranged letter from left to right, Beatrice successfully performs up through the 9th twilight. None shall be left alive. And with the final gouge and kill, some kind of mechanism seems to be activated. Searching around for something that has changed, as a result, Beatrice discovers that one of the lion statues out in front of the chapel have turned to face a different direction. Following the trail of lion statues to the back of the chapel, Beatrice discovers an open secret passageway with stairs leading down into the darkness. And down that secret passageway lay the underground VIP room and 10 tons of gold. Were you excited about the return of the lions?
Were you happy about this, Capelli?
Yeah.
Well, I realized that, like, in episode 6, when Erica and Battler solved the Epitaph, that Battler saw Kinzo point and realizing that, like, oh, that was just the lion's head turning to point the way to the entrance.
Yep.
So yes, I was happy to see the lions return.
As Beatrice examines this golden land, she is startled by the approaching footsteps of Genji. After confirming that she had solved the Epitaph on her own, Genji applauds her. He says that Kinzo intended to hand over the gold and the headship to whoever first managed to do so, and that Kinzo believed that person would be none other than Beatrice-sama. It must have been fate that it would be her that fulfilled those conditions. Genji has Beatrice put on the dress from the portrait and brings her to Kinzo's study along with Kumasawa. Inside, Dr. Nanjo informs Kinzo that she has arrived, and Kinzo, already on his knees crying in supplication to the smaller portrait of Beatrice-sama that he keeps in his study, turns to her and continues to sob and apologize while clutching her skirts. It would seem that just by appearing here, Beatrice has granted Kinzo an opportunity long thought lost to repent for his past sins. Once he finally calms down, Kinzo stands and is able to address the Beatrice before him, not a ghost of the past. Kinzo tells Beatrice that he is glad that she is alive, and Genji and Kumasawa explain to Beatrice that she is the child of Kinzo and the late Beatrice-sama. Kinzo gives Beatrice, no, Leon, his signet ring, and tells her that he is giving her everything of the Oshirimiya family, the headship and all of the gold. He only hopes that it can help heal some of the pain that his sin has caused her to suffer. His final request to her, even though he knows he does not deserve it, is that she call him father just once. Feeling unable to refuse despite her misgivings, Beatrice does so. Kinzo, released of all regrets, laughs maniacally and then falls to the ground, dead. Dr. Nanjo confirms his passing, and Kumasawa speculates that Kinzo truly died long ago and only held on so that he could finally apologize to Beatrice-sama.
Kinzo's such a piece of shit, man. Oh my god. This pissed me off.
Yeah.
It made me so mad. I'm so glad to hear you say
Yeah.
that. I was so angry.
Yeah.
He doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve this absolution.
He doesn't deserve it. And yet, Kinzo is such a well-written character.
Mm.
He's such a piece of shit. But he's such a well-written character. And honestly, just not an idiot. I don't want to, idiot isn't the word I want to use, but I wanted to say, babbling buffoon, of a human being, just at this point. Very unlike the way that Capelli would kind of describe him as being, Shakespearean at the beginning. I just don't...
Well, that was...
I'm not...
Yeah.
No, I know that was at the beginning, but it's how his image has completely gone from... That's what I was trying to compare it to. It's not that I think you were wrong in that sense, but, what we got in episode 1 versus what we're seeing now just shows the entirety of the change in character that Ryoki Shiseiben has done. And it's just so good. And I hate him so much.
The realization that what we saw in episode 1 isn't really Kinzo. It is Beatrice's interpretation of him.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say that
sure.
it's inaccurate. I almost take it as a way of now that they're older, they're do they regret giving him what he wanted? And is painting him as this boisterous, over the top, flamboyant buffoon sort of a means of revenge, right? What's the line where it's from A Knight's Tale, where it's yes, if you mock me, I'll be a fool for a night, but when I write you in my stories, you'll be a fool for forever, something like that, right? It's kind of like that. Is kind of the way that I see it. But again, the whole thing with the message bottles in Umineko, as in a meta narrative of the characters in the future, is that this is just an interpretation, and the characters wouldn't act outside of who they truly were, because Beatrice understood these people to say this is how Kinzo was. It's up until the end, the dude was a babbling fool who cared only about himself and his own self justification of repentance, only to one person that he understood that he wronged, not the rest of his family, his children, his late first wife. What all this surely must have done to her. Doesn't give a shit about any of that. He cares about two people, most of which is himself. The other is Beatrice, and he uses her as a lens to meet what he wants himself. I'm hard pressed to think of anybody more selfish than this piece of work.
Yeah, he gives lip service to caring about the Sayo Beatrice, right? Where he says the gold will be of help repair the pain. It's motherfucker, you could have done a lot until now. Why? You could have actually fixed that,
right?
Especially if you suspected who they were for a while now, at least.
Who knows how long? Yeah, even a day.
But this is also the section where I'm this was what 180'd me on, I guess Genji didn't really save this baby just to save the baby. Because especially with how we're about to see Sayo react to this interaction, everything Genji has done to, quote unquote, save Yasu's life and bring them up and keep them safe and protect them to become the inheritor of the Ushirimiya name and estate, it has been more for Kinzo, seemingly to me, and also has the adverse effect of Yasu and Sayo completely feels like they have zero control over their own life and have never had and never will.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
is the position they are now in because of Genji's actions, which sucks.
Yeah, I would say that's probably one. If we're talking about like the motive for all this, that's probably the biggest one. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why like all this happens is because Sayo feels like fate has determined that this is what it is, and that's kind of when they talk about later about like, well, she created this cat box because like that was the only way to create something that she could control within the fate that she felt that she was trapped in.
We could take this one step further,
Mm.
which is to look at Leon's life in the 1 in a million outcome that is what's framed like the message the model or the cat box that is episode 7.
Sure.
And how Leon is getting the truth from some random dude who just walked into their home.
Yeah.
Nobody that they have cared about or loved has ever given the wherewithal to clue them into what is going on or like what their history of who their identity is, which again, that is Beatrice's whole thing, is they believe I'm Leon and I don't want to talk about my gender at birth, and that's my decision. Thank you for respecting it. But that's and I am Natsui's child and I'm Krause's child, and I'm going to be the new head of the family because it's just I was firstborn of the first child, so that's just how it is. And then the thing that Rick really kind of didn't sit with me well at all is in upcoming, probably the next paragraph, which is just how they turn around and it's like, Natsui, mother, come, let us go. And it's happily ever after. Like, how do you just, because Natsui doesn't know who they really are, but she knows that Leon is not her kid.
Yep. Yeah.
But they're her adopted kid. She doesn't
I'll give you that.
like in the universe where she can be okay with adopting this child. Why is she gonna care where it comes from? All she knows is that she loves this child. Like that Natsui is
Yeah.
an
I
innocent
guess
Natsui.
if she knew the
Hmm.
truth, then I would say it's a fault. But yeah, since she doesn't know.
Yeah, it might change how she feels about Kinzo, but
Yeah.
Right. Like and that is the thing. Everything that we've ever seen from Natsui is she stands up to other adults for children's feelings.
Mhm.
So
True,
I do
yeah.
think if she knew the truth, it's exactly what Kyle just said. It would change her views on Kinzo, but I think it would make her more protective of Leon.
I can't believe, coming from where we were at the end of episode 1, when we listed our favorite and least favorite characters, that I'm come to the realization that Ghoda is like the only half decent person on this island.
yeah, Ghoda did not deserve to die with everyone else.
No.
I don't know what you're talking about. Beatrice is still my number 1.
Yeah.
I mean, murder is still the thing.
Yeah. That's another thing. The manga they took special effort to explain why Ghoda dies. Like they
can't
had a
wait.
special little thing to explain why Sayo was okay with Ghoda's death,
They hate that guy.
because that's like yeah, they hate that guy. Oh boy.
And I guess maybe Battler is, in my mind, a little innocent in this. I don't love that he goes back to his family after all that, but we still have some mysteries on Battler to figure out too.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
again like there's still a lot of exactly what was the thing that pushed things over the edge in terms of deciding to kill everybody, because it obviously that is not the move of someone who is okay, like things must have gotten to a point where it was just beyond fixing, like it was just too much, right?
Yeah.
And then we see some of that with like the depiction of like the conflict between Shannon and Kanon, but we can only really speculate so much. There is still some more information to be gleaned on that, but again, also that is one of those things that we kind of have to interpret on our own, and we'll talk more about that later on. Later, everyone reconvenes in the underground VIP room. Genji, Kumasawa, and Dr. Nanjo explain to Beatrice about Quadrillion and everything she has now inherited as the new head of the Ashurmiya family. However, Beatrice doesn't want anything to change. She doesn't want those responsibilities, or to take anything away from Kraus, or a mountain of gold. All she wants to do is have everything go back to how it was before so that she could keep waiting for Battler. And while Genji agrees to keep all of this a secret, make sure that she knows that to him, she will always be his true master. While she had always been the Golden Witch, on that day, November 29th, she had finally become a true witch. There it is. There's the explanation of what that number means. We finally got it.
Yeah.
Can I please read this exchange that we had in our 3.5 podcast episode?
Oh, please do.
We were talking about these numbers because this was when it came up, and we were like, maybe it is 2 people's birthdays because they were speculating that in the VN.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that the first half of it is Battler's birthday, it's certainly another birthday.
Right? Yeah. And so I said, I'd like the idea of 11/29 being Beato's birthday or 07/15 11/29 with 11/29 as the year being her birthday. And then Cap, you said, but then she'd only be 900 years old, not 1,000. And I said, 1,000 is kind of a generalization. Ben said, she's rounding up.
That's very funny.
Rounding it from 6, but yeah, close enough.
When I told you guys I was finding gold in these old episodes, it's really crazy to go back and listen to them now and be like, oh, we were like inches away from solving this huge mystery. And then Kyle told us not to forget about something. And then we veered off in chase of another red herring. Like it was pretty wild.
That does sound like us.
To be fair, it does you no good to solve that one. It's like, that's Beatrice's birthday. What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, that one in particular ends up meaning completely nothing. But
well, there is one interpretation I can kind of pull from it, which is like the equivalent of like two lovers writing their initials like into the trunk of a tree, right, with a heart around it.
Yes, exactly.
That is true. If you deduce that it is Beatrice's birthday, then you can easily say like, well, then clearly Beatrice loves Battler. Like that's pretty obvious from that.
And at the time, like, I mean, Hayley especially was dead on. It still only led to more questions at the time.
I do also want to say I was walking around my work campus listening to that episode on my headphones, and then I listened to that part, messaged Kyle about it, and then sat back down to continue this reading, and then this reveal happened. Like
Very cool.
it was actually genuinely spooky. Anyway.
Returning to the chapel, Clair ends their tale. Bernkastel heckles that they were just about to get to the fun part, but Will says the previous game said more than enough about that 2-year stretch of time where Clair suffered with their inner conflict. Clair says the duel within themselves had almost been decided, but the timing of the year 1986 was incredibly merciless. Just 1 year either way would have settled it completely differently. It seems a cursed fate that they could not escape from. And so Clair had decided to leave everything to a spin of the demon's roulette. While they could not control their fate, they could use their unshakable will to create an infinite span of possibilities within the bounds of their limited fates of Rokkenjiima's October 4th and 5th, 1986. And with that, Clair brings their confession to an end. Clair turns to Leon and urges them to live with enough happiness for the both of them, and thanks Bernkastel for letting them see that such a future did in fact exist.
Okay. Someone explain to me what this paragraph means. I don't get it. Like, I don't understand what happened in those 2 years. Nothing makes sense anymore by this point.
Yeah.
Like, I really struggle to find out how it's supposed to be assumed that we should know how to get from the point that we end when she becomes the Golden Witch to the start of the games.
That's what I was referring to at the top of the episode, where I was like, there's still so much of this motive that I feel like is unspoken currently.
Yeah, so we can we kind of talked about it a little bit. We can kind of look back at the Shannon Kanon conflict about like who does Sayo want to be? Does Sayo want to be Shannon and marry George? But there's also the kind of the running themes like, well, Kanon says you can't. You literally cannot give him the future that he wants, which was to have a family. She can't do that. But like George just was going to propose like at this family gathering. Oh, also the family gathering that Battler happens to come back for and reunite, these feelings that she's led dormant for 6 years that she's, passed on to this Beatrice persona, however you want to interpret that. Like it's all of these factors kind of piling up on one another and requiring something to happen. There's definitely still a lot to unpack in regards of figuring out like exactly, how does that lead to the killings? What would have happened a year earlier? What would have happened a year later? There's none of that is like super well defined based on what we know so far. So that's something that we'll have to continue to think about, I think.
Okay, and that's fine. I struggle to know how they can, like, with a straight face say, and that's how it leads up to this.
Yeah.
Because to me, it doesn't explain enough. Like, yes, there's a lot of, if you go back and examine the beginning, a lot of the previous games where you're seeing, like, Jessica and Kanon, and you're seeing Shannon and George at the aquarium versus Jessica and Kanon at the school. You're seeing two different sides of them, and that's great. But, like, where does the Battler fit into this? What would have happened a year prior and later? Like, I just don't get how we're supposed to understand that. And I get, like, how it ends up, like, with the metaphorical battle between Shannon and Kanon dueling for their fates, like, who wins and who loses. But what happens in the middle confounds me.
Yeah, that one they definitely. I think they leave it a little bit too up to interpretation. It's a bit rough.
If you had to make a guess, what do you think it is?
I don't wanna.
Well, that's kind of what he's challenging you to do.
Yeah.
Is make a
Yeah.
guess. Like, what do you think it is? Because like I could make some guesses.
Yeah. It's frustrating because I don't even necessarily understand what they mean by the spin of the demon's wheel at this point. Like, I get that there can be so many different outcomes.
I still don't understand what the fuck the key is.
Yeah.
6 gems by the key. Yeah, it also doesn't help that they definitely mix a lot of metaphors between these things, because sometimes it's like, well, we're using the same language because it sounds witchy. So
Yeah.
Beatrice incorporates it into her ritual, and it's like, well, that doesn't literally track, but it gets even more confusing.
Yeah.
I also don't know because since it was brought up that like if this had happened a year earlier or a year later, perhaps things would have ended differently. I've been trying to figure out if it has something to do with like the number 6 having significance, because we see the number 6 pop up in a couple of ways, like the 6 sacrifices of the first Twilight, or if it really is just like the coincidental timing happened to be 6 years and the number doesn't really matter. Like because I really liked Hayley's interpretation from a couple episodes ago where she talks about how like it's probably just to do with Sayo's feelings and how twisted up they are. Like 6 was just the sweet spot where they were close enough to George but not so fully invested in George that Battler shook them, and if it had been earlier, they wouldn't have been as invested in George, so it wouldn't have mattered as much. I'm still at a loss for all of that.
I think that's generally what it's going for, is something along those lines, yeah.
Sure.
This is why abstinence before marriage doesn't work.
Yeah, clearly they needed to do their incest, is what you're asking for, Capelli.
You need to know who the other person is, you know? In this case, you really need to know who the other person is.
It would have helped a
Yeah.
lot, I think, if they had noticed.
I've been debating bringing this up, but like, isn't some of this at some point on Sayo? I understand about the multiple personalities, and I'm trying to figure out the way that I can express this without being like obtuse about whatever issues that they're dealing with.
Sure.
But like, Shannon is very clearly, I don't want to say leading George on, but like not sharing of the fact that like they are also canon and like Kanon is seeing Jessica and not telling Jessica this. And then there's Beatrice, who is also technically there, that still has a thing for Battler, even if Shannon persona doesn't anymore, because it was moved from, like, literally moved from one of the personalities to another. Like, where does the line get drawn in terms of accountability for the human being that is dating both Jessica and George?
Yeah.
And dating's not the right word. I'm aware.
So that's assuming they have enough cognizance to realize that they are all the same person, which I don't think they do. In every instance we've seen in one of these characters talking to another, even Yasu thinks Shannon was separate from themselves. So, and Beato appears in their dreams and they give this kernel of love that they have to Beatrice to hold on to for them. Like, I think that that is part of Sayo's entire situation, is that they do not have the self-awareness or the ability to recognize that they are all in the same body, even if they have to go through the motions of putting on different outfits, stuff their bra, change their hair, whatever they're doing to present as different people to different members of the family. Like, I don't think that they have that level of awareness, genuinely. And when they solve the epitaph, they are in Beatrice mode. Shannon and Kanon. So Beatrice is the person who is descended from the Ushiromiya family. Shannon and Kanon are, for all intents and purposes, these orphans that are not related to the family in any way, as far as they know. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what makes it so tricky when we're trying to interpret exactly what, because like if you look at literally what's being shown, yeah, like it seems very much like Shannon and Kanon and Beatrice are these, literal personas inside of the system. But yeah, it's really hard to say. I think that the story doesn't really line up with them like not having any cognizance of it, because Shannon and Kanon have many conversations about them being furniture and how Shannon can't give George the future that he wants. So I don't think there's like no knowledge, even in the world where they are a system of altars. I think they have that knowledge. I don't think that's a question. I don't think that's a thing they don't understand. And then the alternative perspective where it's just an actual person just having identity crisis and deciding who they want to be. It is tricky, Ben, when we're talking about like, well, like why is Yasu doing this? Why is Sayo acting like this? And I think a lot of it's because their character is very reactive, right? Their entire life has been constrained. They've been forced to grow up in this orphanage without parents, all alone, then immediately had to work as a servant since when they were 6. And even then they were like forced to not be friends with the person that like was obviously supposed to be their friend in Jessica, and had to like and only be able to do that in secret. They're very reserved. They're very cowardly is an unkind way to say it, but not an accurate way to say it. It's a lot of Sayo's problems come from the fact that they are not able to choose, not able to act. I think that's expressed pretty thoroughly through the way that the narrative is talking about. Like they could not choose, right? They had this battle between Shannon and Kanon, and they couldn't pick. They let it linger for too long, right? And that's why things came to a head. It's because they could not choose who they wanted to be, who they wanted to love. And then on top of that, the battle situation. And on top of that, the sudden reveal that it's all incest situation, and you get a huge time bomb.
It's incest all the way down.
Yeah.
Sure is.
There's a level of learned helplessness with them. And I think that
Yes, for
plays into, because I was just thinking about doing this whole reading and watching Clair, like watching the way Sayo reacts when Genji brings them to Kinzo, because I had that theory. I was like, I really hope she fucking kills Kinzo. And
well, she kind of does.
She kind of does, but not actively, not by choice.
No.
They are never an active driver of their own life, which is their tragedy, like above all else. And like them just giving up because they were never given the tools to believe they could be anything more than a servant or a fuck up, because they're constantly being told growing up by all the other servants that they're just bad at their jobs, being pranked into losing things, etc. And it gets to the point where when suddenly they are given power, they are given status and title and wealth, they're like, I don't want anything to change. Again, not to be diagnostic here, but there's an element of like Stockholm syndrome in that, where you become acclimated to whatever situation you're in, that trying to branch outside of that is scary.
For sure.
It's something I've experienced in my own life, like much more minor sense, but like I can't even imagine. It's all bad.
Yeah, it's not good, and they were not given the tools to know how to deal with this stuff. They were failed at every step of their life by the people who were supposed to be responsible for them. They were abandoned, they were put into a system, and then they were, raised for a specific purpose, abandoned over and over again, and then had, a lot of really terrible stuff kind of shoved to their face. We could spend forever talking about Beatrice, about Sayo, about like, there's so much to unpack. There's one of the reasons why Beatrice as a character is considered to be one of many people's favorite characters, because they contain multitudes, and we are definitely gonna have to come back to this at some point in the future, because there's still so much to talk about, and we still have to get to the end of this story, so we're gonna have to move on here. So it is time for Beatrice's funeral to come to an end. Clair asks Will to perform their final rites. While he is not the person they had wanted to understand their heart, that anyone did was still a miracle. Bernkastel warns Leon to step back. It is time for the detective to bring this mystery to a close. Will asks just stopping their heart would be enough, but Clair tells him to bury it all. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, illusions to illusions, and dreams to dreams. In the same manner as the final battle at the end of the 4th game, they would address all of the mysteries. Will manifests a sword of his own, not of red, blue, or even gold truth, but solid black, with which he can cut the truth out from the fiction. Clair manifesting their own silver sword, their first and final battle begins. First game, first twilight. 6 corpses in the gardening shed. Illusions to illusions. The corpse that cannot return to earth returns to illusions. Each slice of Will's pitch-black blade cuts through Clair's form like water, scattering golden flower petals instead of blood. First game, second twilight. 2 corpses are close together in a locked room, protected by a chain. Illusions to illusions. A chain of illusions can imprison only illusions. First game, Fourth Twilight. The old head from the locked room study, confined in a scorching furnace. Illusions to illusions. Let the man of illusions go to where he belongs. First game, Fifth Twilight. The last moment of the boy who offered his chest to a stake. Illusions to illusions. The witch and stake of illusions can pierce naught but illusions. First game, Sixth, Seventh, and Eighth Twilights. 3 corpses lying in the locked room of the singing girl. Illusions to illusions. Illusions of the blind girl's song. Illusions of a locked room. With the first game solved, Claire praises Will's understanding. Will comments that was an especially risky game for Claire. After all, what would they have done if he'd insisted on seeing their face and just stepped inside? Claire simply responds that this is what it means to entrust herself to fate.
The vast majority of these are just solved by understanding who or what Beatrice is.
Yeah.
Like, throughout even our very first reading, like, everybody picked up on somebody being suspicious. I was super suspicious of Genji. I know Hayley and Ben were super suspicious of Kumasawa. Becca, I don't recall who you were suspicious of, but I mean, Ben was also suspicious of Maria. Like, all rightly so. We're picking up on all of the accomplices. None of us clued in.
Yeah, in episode 1, Hideyoshi is the only one I really landed on.
Right, and he's definitely part of it, at least for the first Twilight of Game 1. First Twilight of Game 1, we have all of the victims were poisoned by tea. And if I were to go back and read it, I think there's something about the way that Natsui left the room that may incline her to have been immune to the first Twilight, a la the Scorpion Charm. But either way, all of the blood is in the dining room. So they were murdered there by Beatrice. The accomplices then carried the bodies to the shed. That is not Shannon's body. What that body is not relevant. It can just be junk, right? The only thing that really matters is the fact that only Kanon and Hideyoshi saw her body. So, right, like, we have a red that says, I guarantee the identity of all identified corpses. Therefore, there were no body double tricks, right? Which sounds very precise, but it's also super ambiguous.
Yes.
How do Shannon and Kanon's bodies count for these reds, right? There are no double tricks. But if they don't have true dead bodies, what does it matter? So
It's not a
I think I
corpse.
found the heart,
yeah.
so I'm content, but it's not a corpse, exactly. But it is a body-shaped thing. So it goes back to how you get super into the nitty-gritty and defining a lot of these.
But the red text says all of the corpses are identified. So Shannon's body not being a corpse, whether it's a mannequin, whatever it is low-key excluded from that red.
I can guarantee the identities of all unidentified corpses. Shannon gets identified.
But she's not a corpse, so it doesn't matter.
But she's not a corpse. That's what I'm saying.
And she's not a corpse. So, like, either way, it gets weird. Either way. Twilight 2, Kanon and Genji find the door, easily opening it, and allowing the murder to happen. Then they tell everybody it was a locked room.
Yeah, that's the answer to, like, so many of these. It's like,
and that's just it. It's like, oh, and that's sheeps and wolves. That's sheeps and wolves.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the people who say they saw magic, you cannot trust their perspective. That's the answer to so many of these, right? Twilight 3, Kinzo's real body was grave robbed and burned. Maybe they found a body double, whatever. Kanon dies, and Kumasawa and Nanjo sell it.
Were they the only 3 down there?
No, everybody goes down there and sees Kanon's body, right? But they don't investigate it too closely. There is a stake sticking out of Kanon's chest per Battler's perspective, but he doesn't do an autopsy. He doesn't examine the body, right? He just accepts the acting.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Kanon's literally announced dead in, like, an off-screen line. It's like, then they carried Kanon's body upstairs, and Dr. Nanjo announced him dead.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of these early deaths are just hidden by, like, the thinnest of veils.
I mean, yeah, that's the big trick in episode 1 is that, like, we did not know at this point that the narration was going to be so thoroughly lying all the time. Like,
yeah,
that's the big trick for a lot of the early parts of the story.
Twilight 5, this is where the 3 die and Maria's just singing in the corner. This is the most straightforward one of the whole game, in my opinion. Beatrice kills them. They don't fight it per the arrangement we suspect they have with her. Twilight 6, Beatrice shoots Natsui.
Yep.
And then I have in parentheses, reviewing the notes I made back in October of last year in preparation for our post-episode 5 chat, I actually have it written down that Shannon/Kanon are the killers, with accomplices of Genji, Nanjo, Kumasawa, and Maria.
Yeah.
Go me.
Yeah, you had that one pretty... The only thing you couldn't figure out was how Kanon survived Kanon was dead from the stake in the chest and then like was still doing stuff. That was the one trick you couldn't quite pin down because the red troops were like really, really devious about like, Kanon's dead.
Maybe that's why I've been so confused. Like, I get Beatrice, Shannon, Kanon technically are the ones committing a lot of this stuff. Why are the accomplices going along with it? Maybe that's the why done it is where I am struggling so much with reconciling the how done it. Because if I'm not seeing even the slightest motive for why Kumasawa, Genji, Nanjo are going along with this, I don't understand.
Yeah, what would drive people to accept this?
Yeah, so this is one of those things that is just, this is not very well explained for the story.
Like, at all?
And there's not a lot of information coming. This is not, like, there is some stuff that is explained later, kind of in the manga, but it's not really well explained in the VN, why this is going on. Why, for the most part, you can kind of say, like, well, Genji clearly has a lot of guilt over what happened, and also treats, Sayo as their master. If they ordered this to happen, it's possible he would go along with that. He's already shown himself to be fucking crazy in terms of the way that he handled the entire situation leading up to this. His devotion to Kinzo. Dr. Nanjo was being bought off, right? Like, he was being given gold to his children who were sick,
all
right?
of them were.
All of them were being bought off to some degree, yeah.
But it's hard to reconcile allowing yourself to be killed, which I guess the end of episode 3 or 4, wherever it is that Nanjo dies, and it's like, all right, who did it?
He's surprised. He begs for his life.
He begs for his life. He does not want to die. So
yeah,
that's why when you say like this is the most straightforward one of them all, I just don't get what happened.
Looking back on it now, I think Genji is the one who's got like an almost cult-like level of subservience to Sayo.
Yes, I get that.
Yeah.
Genji is the only one I fully get.
So Genji could assist.
Nanjo and Kumasawa are still like the mysteries to me, and like actually are they accomplices or is it just Genji plus Shannon/Kanon/Beatrice?
But if you put Genji and Sayo against Kumasawa and Nanjo, my money is on Genji and Sayo. Kumasawa is an old woman. So, but that's the thing. If we're taking it under assumption that Genji would assist them, then yeah, Genji's going to help Sayo kill those two and then take whatever Sayo gives him. So,
or they may have just truly believed that they would just get money and survive.
Yeah.
And then, because like the way that Nanjo and especially Kumasawa freak out when they're kicked out of the study in episode 1 is like, damn. But I mean, we've also seen that whoever's lying is so absolutely convincing. It's insane.
Yeah.
You just have to accept that like their master.
It is a little bit of a plot hole that everyone is so goddamn convincing. You have to kind of accept that for anything to work in this genre to a degree. But okay, so one thing we can kind of deduce in episode 5, which is an answer arc episode, so it is meant to show you something of the truth, even if it is going to be kind of oblique. We know that the people in the guest room that get their throats slit are not dead. They're acting. They're faking it.
Yeah.
So we know that getting people to fake their deaths and then they later die is a thing that is on the table, of a thing that the culprit does.
True.
So how much do the people who are participating in these things know is actually happening is a real question.
I don't even think we get reds about their bodies.
We get a lot of reds.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We do get reds that let's see. We don't get when they're dead.
Right. No, they die by midnight of the second day.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that gets brought up, the Reaper that closes the game.
Anyway, that's episode 1. Anything else you guys want to say to episode 1 before we move on to 2? All right, 2.
No.
My only question, because you said they got poisoned by tea in the first Twilight.
Right.
Do you think the mutilation was just to cover that up?
It could be a paralytic. It could be a short-acting poison. The reason I say it is because there is very much conversations, mostly in episode 1, about the teas that Shannon and or Kanon choose for the family. Oh, this is decadent, or Shannon's her hands are shaking, probably because she knows she's actively poisoning them.
I would actually super, because of the conversation we just had, logistically, how does a canonically frail person kill 6 grown-ass adults? Well, 5, because Shannon's not actually dead. And yeah, I think you would have to drug them in order to then carry out the actual killing blows. But I was thinking that the guns being used way more than we actually think they are is also a possibility because gunshots in the middle of a typhoon are just going to sound like thunder. So
Maybe.
I was also potentially wondering, I don't think they happened in the dining room in that twilight necessarily, just a general thought I had.
The thing is that there's never any bullet holes ever found.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I don't think it happens specifically in that instance, but
I'm trying to remember if there is, or if I'm just remembering the movie Clue.
That's always a great question.
1 + 2 + 2 + 1.
Yeah.
In most of my everyday life, I'm just wondering if I'm thinking about the movie Clue, Kyle.
As we should all be thinking more about the movie Clue, yeah.
It doesn't ultimately matter here in this moment, but
Yeah. I mean, also the gunshot, like, obviously they're being shot, and then that's how the stakes are inserted into their heads, is like,
yeah.
they speculate a lot throughout the movie. Like, I don't know, do they have some kind of, like, thing that, a pneumatic tube that breaks open their skull so they have a crossbow that shoots stakes? It's like, no, they probably just shot them and put the
Yeah.
stake there.
Yeah.
Do they have a cattle killing device like Anton Chigurh? Sorry,
Right.
I'm ready to move on if you are.
They continue on to the second game. Second game, First Twilight. 6 with their stomachs split open in the locked room chapel. Illusions to illusions. The gold truth locks the lock of illusions. Second game, Second Twilight. Even the corpses of the two who are close cannot be close. Illusions to illusions. Illusions who have fulfilled their role do not leave a corpse. Second game, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Twilights. In Atsui's locked room, none are left alive. Earth to earth. No one would dispute that a coffin is a closed room. Second game, Seventh and Eighth Twilights. The two sliced to death by the red-eyed phantom. Earth to earth, illusions to illusions. No illusion can create a corpse. This concludes the second game. As Will's blade continues to slice more and more golden petals from Claire's heart, the witch illusion begins to scatter.
Episode 2. Twilight 1, I still have poison tea remaining the strongest possibility to disable the 6 grown adults. We are given the briefest of glimpses as to why they went there, but point is that Beatrice told them who they were. The family, those victims went and followed.
Mhm.
All say you are a witch, which is, I think, to say they announced that, hey, I solved the epitaph, and here it is. Oh, yep, I accept that you solving the epitaph means you are a witch. That is what that whole thing is. Again, poisoned, someone put it, you just rip open their guts while they're poisoned.
Sure.
Basically the same thing.
Okay. How do you begin with what is said here about, let's see, illusions to illusions, the gold truth locks the lock of illusions?
Shut up. About Twilight 2. Jessica is locked in her room. Beatrice takes over the body of Kanon, kills her. Kanon dies, which is to say his personality will not return. Nanjo finds the master key on Jessica. I called that day one.
I'm not even sure if that's necessary. Given that we have the Kanon just disappearing thing, it may not even be required. It's hard to say.
Well, somebody had to be in that room to kill Jessica, and then the door was locked on the way out.
Yeah.
Twilight 3, 4, 5. Beatrice kills Ghoda. Shannon dies. Because they can't stand to watch George die. I don't really believe that. Then Beatrice finishes off George. All of this occurs inside the locked room, which I think I didn't really examine too closely the location of the master keys at this moment. So I don't know if I can say definitively I have that one solved.
That is one of my favorite of Will's lines, is like, no one can defute that a coffin is a closed room. Baller line, Will.
Does it mean that somehow Beatrice had 2 master keys? One for Shannon, one for Kanon?
I think they do mention at some point there's like one key missing somehow, but like it's presented in a way where it's like this is really of no consequence because there's no way it could be involved. I think I don't remember. And Twilight 7-8, Kumasawa Nanjo killed off screen. Who cares? The only real mystery of episode 2 is Kanon's resurrection and how like nobody in that room would confuse him for something else, which is like, okay, so Beatrice is just back in Kanon mode, but then he is fighting with Shannon. So I'd have to really like reread like 20% of episode 2 to get a good handle on that. But to me, it's just like most of these people's perspectives are unreliable.
Yep.
Ghoda is the only person who has the opportunity and would have the means and desire to reveal like something weird happened. But dude is clearly shaken up. So I think he believes he actually saw Ghoda because it probably did. But how you define them as dead and then resurrected because it's magic, right? I do think that is actually clever, like wordplay within the scope of the story. Also, with Kumasawa Nanjo's deaths, the orders, the times of it is all super arbitrary, especially when the island gets blown up. Don't care.
Third game, First Twilight. 6 corpses connected by the linked locked rooms. Illusions to illusions. In a locked room ring, the end and the beginning overlap. Third game, Second Twilight. The corpses of mother and child lie together in the rose garden. Earth to earth. No falsehoods in their final moments as told. Third game, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Twilights. 3 corpses lying in the mansion. Earth to earth. No falsehoods in their final moments as told. Third game, Seventh and Eighth Twilights. The corpses of husband and wife lie exposed under the arbor. Earth to earth. The obvious culprit wields the blade of impermanence.
Episode 3, Twilight 1. Never get Shannon and Candy's bodies discussed, so it's still ambiguous as the game pieces examining this murder is off-screen. Suffice to say, when you exclude Shannon and or Kanon and Kinzo's bodies from being killed, then the locked room mystery easily falls apart. I didn't feel the need to dive into it, the super nitty-gritty. I do remember that when we were reviewing this episode, and I think 3.2, we came up with a pretty plausible solution, but for the life of me, I can't remember what it is. Becca, do you remember since you're re-listening?
I don't actually.
I think probably Dr. Nanjo accomplice was probably a part of it, right? If Dr. Nanjo's lying, you could do a lot of stuff. So.
That's true.
I think that was mainly it. Was Nanjo's the only one inspecting these bodies because he's the one with the accreditation to pronounce people dead. And if we take it that he's an accomplice in every version, then his word means absolutely nothing in any of these games.
Yeah, they only get away with it because they can say that Shannon and Kanon can die, even if it's a double bluff basically. Yeah, except that's not what double bluff means. Never mind.
Twilight 2, Beatrice pushes Rosa and she dies falling on the fence, then strangles Maria. Maria does not fight this as she believes she is going to the Golden Land. Fucked up. The rest of this episode is just, okay, well, Beatrice killed them with access to all the locked rooms. The only mysteries are how George exited the guest house and why Kyrie went to the mansion. I don't remember the details to George escaping, but if there's any accomplice in the house with him, they likely just locked the window behind him as he left.
Yeah, that's kind of what they laid out in the story. They basically say, Dr. Nanjo probably just locked the door afterwards.
Yeah. This is likely how Kanon frees Battler in episode 6.
Ooh, interesting.
As for Kyrie, I think she suspects Hideyoshi, and frankly, knowing what we do about his actions in the first Twilight of Game 1, I would not be surprised to learn he too was an accomplice all along, and possibly is the person who killed Rosa and Maria. Because we never get any reds about Hideyoshi's involvement in any way.
Yeah, I think the implication of that one is that it's Eva that did it. I don't know. It's hard to say. That's what the metaphor says. The metaphor said that Eva took over the killings from that point on.
Maybe.
I think that that's true.
I also totally buy that Beatrice was standing there with Eva as she killed Maria and Rosa and was just like, this is fate and I can't stop it.
Maybe.
I believe
that would absolutely happen, yeah.
Even more heartbreaking knowing the history we have between her and Maria.
Fourth game, First Twilight. A massacring storm sweeps through the dining hall. Illusions to illusions. Tales woven by the gold truth return to illusions. Fourth game, Second Twilight. The two young ones face their trials and pass away together. Illusions to illusions. Tales woven by the gold truth return to illusions. Fourth game, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Seventh, and Eighth Twilights. None of the runaways are left alive. Earth to earth, illusions to illusions. Silent corpses adorned by fiction. Fourth game, Ninth Twilight. And none shall be left alive. Earth to earth, illusions to illusions. Fiction locked inside a cat box becomes the truth. With almost every riddle solved, Claire's form has begun to dissolve into a storm of golden rose petals that now fill the chapel. Raising her arms wide in preparation for Will's final strike, Clair only has one final question. Who am I? Illusions to illusions. The Promised Reaper lowers the curtain on the tale, regardless of the witch's will. And with that final blow, Claire's form completely dissolves. Even the golden heart they left behind quickly dissolves into a storm of golden petals, and then that too fades away into nothing.
This whole episode is a big ol' asterisk. The truth, capital T, here is most likely one big coercion from Beatrice through intimidation, bribes, and or threatening their children. We know Kumasawa impersonated Kinzo 1 year ago, so precedent exists for this subterfuge. Though I think the family was forced to admit, yeah, that's Def Kinzo, without believing it. The real mysteries of episode 4 are Battler's sin, Battler's identity, and how Beatrice can kill Battler if he's truly the last one alive on the island. We know Battler's sin, breaking his promise to Shannon. How this results in people dying, from what info we have, it can only be the result of Beatrice's actions based on it. Battler's identity? He's probably Kyrie's baby, swapped in the hospital. Brown and purple hair makes red. What sort of George R.R. Martin is P plus B equals R? Oh my god, I just looked up a photo of the original Art Rudolph describing this thing as a ladies' man is horrifying. He has moobs.
He is really weird looking in their art.
I just re-listened to this episode today because we talked about this when this came up. We talked about Battler's parentage a lot, and I still think that my theory is completely correct, but it is that he is Kyrie's child that was swapped with Asumu's child who was stillborn or miscarried or whatever, and they gave him to the Ushirumiya family so that Kyrie's this is my speculation now because this is completely out of text, but my speculation is that her mafia family wanted to have an in with the Ushirumiyas, and also, like, it is her child. So if her child ascends the Ushirumiya throne, eventually it means if Battler's true parentage is revealed, then he would be a Sumidera with the Ushirumiya fortune. But also the precedent
I think that's the only motive that makes sense to swap the babies.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really funny because when I brought it up the first time, you fought me on that. But also, the precedent we have for Kyrie birthing a red-haired child is Angie.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
That while I do believe that is Occam's razor, like that's just not only does that all that make sense, the hints that we get where it's like, yeah, Kyrie must secretly really hate Battler, right? Because he's a Sumu's child, not hers. But yet every interaction we get between the two of them, you don't pick up on that at all.
oh yeah, she's always been very loving to him.
When she talks about how she's envy, right? She talks about how she hated Asumu, but none of that ever seemed to extend it to Battler. So like that precedent is there. However, that does not solve the final mystery of the questions arc, which is you are the last person on the island, yet I am here and I will kill you. How? The only thing that I can even imagine is that this current Battler is just part of the Beatrice hive mind, which comes with its whole other set of issues if that would somehow be the truth, right? It's a little too far-fetched. It breaks the motive,
that would be so many problems.
but it's just like I can't really fathom like
Can you please remind me of context in which this red truth is said? Because I don't remember when it happens.
This is the scene where at the very end of episode 4, like in the final duel, after Battler's basically destroyed all of Beatrice's mysteries, and she's, I'm going to reveal my heart to you now, and she, a ghost of her appears and says, Battler, you are all alone on this island here now, and yet I will kill you. Who am I?
Yeah, no, I get that. That's the scene that I said was like super important.
This is later than the Rain confrontation with Beato on the roof. This is what
okay.
Kyle is talking about happens after that.
Sure, I guess I conflated them because
And
I
they're-
think that they're both
They're both very
important.
important. Yeah.
I
Yes.
haven't gotten to this in my re-listen yet. Like, I think I'm about to.
I got the red truths that like talk about Battler's sin and everything listed right here. So here we go. In the red, Ushirimiya Battler, I will now kill you. And right now, there is no one other than you on this island. The only one alive on this island is you. Nothing outside the island can interfere. You are all alone on this island. And of course, I am not you. Yet I am here now and am about to kill you. I don't have a solution that I like for this.
Explosion.
Yeah, that has to be the Reaper at this case. Is like somehow Beatrice set something up such that
The
this,
bomb?
Yeah,
Yes.
whatever bomb this is. Yeah.
I believe that there is still a submarine somewhere in whatever hidden thing.
That still has torpedoes on it.
Yes, that has explosives in it that was rigged to go off at a certain point, and whoever is in the VIP room at the moment that happens survives. That is what I think.
Didn't they say that they found Eva and Kumadorian though?
Eva claims to have survived by fleeing to Quadrillion. Yes.
Okay.
The VIP room has passages to both mansions, does it not?
Yeah, I agree with
It does.
that. I was just clarifying that.
So I mean, it matters like what the explosive is. Did it come from the submarine? Was it placed in the mansion?
Yeah.
Right? Because then it's like, okay, I don't believe that this person has means to what is essentially a small nuke to completely destroy the island.
It blew up like several kilometers, I think. Yeah.
But still, like Angie can return to the island, so the island continues to exist.
Sure. Yeah, I'm less certain about it being an actual submarine. That's just like a theory, but like an explosion. We know an explosion happened and that explosives existed at some point somewhere on the island, and I think those were used.
the story could even hand wave it and say Genji used money from the gold to get Sayo whatever they wanted.
And that would also be viable, yeah. Will does have a line in one of the previous episodes where he talks about Who Am I mystery, and he says that is the other treasure of the Golden Land.
Say that again?
He refers to the answer to Who Am I riddle is, you could consider that the other treasure of the Golden Land.
My brain is fried. I don't got it anymore.
I mean, we're not gonna I don't think there's any other. Well, no, there might. Well, we can move on. Well, more confirmations might be coming at some point in the future, so we don't have to dwell on this too much further. But I think you'll have some solid ideas.
Did you want to say any more, Capelli?
No, I didn't bother with episode 5 and 6.
It's not included in this, so lucky you.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit, because those aren't Beatrice's games, even though that doesn't track with the other things we know. Well, so we'll see if is that a contradiction in the story or a contradiction in what we've been told.
Mhm.
Yes, both. I'm mad. I have a lot of feelings, but
Speak on them.
I want to see. I need to wait to see how this fully wraps up before I get my full feelings on this answers arc, because I don't know my own feelings.
All right. Well, let's finish off this summary, and then you'll get to go do your next reading, and I think you'll have a lot of stuff you want to talk about from that one.
More questions?
Maybe some answers. We'll see.
I don't believe you.
All right. We return to the theater, and Claire's form appears upon the stage. They point to an invisible audience whose applause continues into eternity as Clair and the theater sink into the darkness of oblivion. People are born with sin and live life to obtain forgiveness from someone. Or perhaps they are born as mysteries and live life searching for someone to solve them. Here, all of her riddles have been solved, with no lingering regrets. People are riddles. They want someone else to solve their riddle. They live life wanting someone to solve the riddle that they are, the most difficult riddle in the world. They want someone to look at the riddle they are, and they want that person to solve it. For her, that wish has been granted. Her soul will wander no longer. Rest in eternal slumber within your catbox coffin. Returning to the chapel of the human world, all signs of the golden blizzard have vanished. Will comforts Leon, telling them that their very existence was a miracle that saved Clair from the cursed dead-end fate that they had given up on trying to escape. Leon thanks Will in Claire's place, and even Will has to admit that this was a tasteful ending for one of Bernkastel's games. Bernkastel merely says that it was her duty as someone who enjoyed playing that kid's game to clean up after they had gone. And in the end, they had shown that this tale was indeed a mystery, and the witch illusion had been spectacularly crushed. Out of respect for the absolute and certain willpower that child had to bring an end to this tangled tale of love, the Witch of Certainty had made them a witch for just 2 days. But within those 2 days were an endless kaleidoscope of tales. And even though Bernkastel would not be granting a miracle, even that ending was something that child wished for. Leon wonders what truth those endless tales settled on in the end. But as Bernkastel says, when the cat box is opened, all we find are a destroyed mansion and Eva as the only survivor. With her having passed without saying anything, the truth remains inside the endless cat box. And while Battler may have written up what he believes to be the happiest possible tale, which he left in Beatrice's coffin, Will reminds Leon that their happiness is Claire's true salvation. And with that, the funeral is over, and Bernkastel releases the barrier around the chapel. With one last word of thanks from Leon, Will steps out of the chapel and leaves the game board. As Bernkastel too turns to leave, Leon offers her their thanks as well, and apologizes for having misjudged her. Bernkastel calls out to Aurora, and all of the other observer witches, and tells them that she is now done. If they still don't get it, they will just have to think and discuss amongst themselves. With Bernkastel too now gone, Leon is left all alone in the chapel. However, with time moving once again, the family members all begin to trickle in now that the funeral is over. Leon rushes to Kinzo's side and tells him that they believe that Beatrice's soul was saved. After all, Leon was just with her and saw her leave on her journey with no regrets. And as they all leave the chapel, a beam of sunlight peeks through the clouds, looking like a staircase leading up to heaven. And that brings us to the end of this week's reading.
I have one huge, enormous question.
Uh-huh.
Which is Eva.
Mhm.
If Eva has to survive, what the fuck is the deal with the reds at the end of episode 4 that we were just talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that red just might only apply to that episode. As we've seen, not all reds apply to all episodes.
Yeah, so is the only is the only actual episode 3? Is that the actual world? Like, I know that we have all these
Maybe.
bubbles of different things, but like we know when the cat box is lifted that Eva survives.
Yeah.
So why does anything else even happen? How do the I don't get how these all connect. And that's where I'm also struggling.
Well, I mean, in the only future world we've seen, Angie's future world, which has having survived. The stories we've seen seem to have been message bottles, right? The first two were the two that were found by the police and are washed up on shore that seem to have been written by the culprit. And then the rest were written supposedly by this author, Hachijo Toya. And episode 3 is just one of those stories that Hachijo Toya wrote. That leaves the question, is anything in the meta world real? Is it all just a metaphor for these stories, et cetera, et cetera? Are these multi-worlds and only the one of episode 3 is real? We don't know yet. It is an open question.
I have a read on the meta world that involves who I think Bernkastel and Lambda Delta are allegories of, and it's another one of those things
I love this conversation.
where this is what I wanted to wait for Hayley for, and maybe we can table it to get into deeper next episode because we've already been running really long with this one.
Yes, yeah.
The thing that I have really been listening back to episodes 3 and 4 about, because I wanted to see if this theory would get disproven or stronger by revisiting those episodes, is that Bernkastel is an allegory for Angie, Lambda Delta is an allegory for Maria, and Beatrice is still Yasu Beatrice Sayo. I feel like there's really compelling evidence that has been adding up to only further support this theory that I can enumerate in much more detail when we have Hayley back. But I do think that provides a lens to view the meta world as like essentially the three witches of Mariage Sorciere fighting over how they want to play their game and how their magic works in a way.
Okay. Yeah, looking forward to hearing more details on that. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up this episode. Yes, we have gone super long. Next week, we are reading about 4 hours of the VN, finishing off episode 7 with the Tea Party and question mark segments. That is videos 129 through 133 of the YouTube playlist. Yeah.
4 hours?
It's a bit long because we have to do this whole chunk, I think, in one reading because it is a doozy. It is an incredible read. I am so excited for y'all to go off and read this and for us to talk about it. So, were y'all excited to see the return of the gold truth in this episode finally?
Yeah, I did like that one little mention of it. We get one more hint as to what the hell it is.
Two uses of it. It's not used, technically, so I was not wrong. It has not been used. It just mentioned.
Just that the gold can't be used in this instance, which is like, I still don't know what it means.
Yeah, so some more things to think about if you wish to contemplate what that means.
What were the previous, because we've only gotten 2 statements in the gold prior to this, correct?
I guarantee that this corpse is a Shirimiya Kinzo, and it was a splendid bit of magic, the appearance of the candy in a cup.
Okay. Interesting.
It's an interesting one. Yeah, I did not understand the gold truth when I was reading this originally. When I got to this, I was like, what the fuck does that mean? So
I want to go to sleep.
Yeah, that's fair. I think if you're reading this and you're not already asleep listening to us before you go to bed, congrats. Yeah, thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed our theorizing about all the stuff. We are in the answer arcs. Answers are happening. I can't believe there's an arc after this. What on earth is that going to be about? I'm really excited for us to talk more. And thank you for joining us. And remember to think off meta.